Hey, Mark, can you elevate Sam, please? Thank you.
Hello, can you guys all hear me?
Yes, we can.
We
Can't see you,
can.
though.
Thank you.
You want to check your video as well?
Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes, we can hear you, but I also was asking if you wanted to check your video, your camera. I can see you, Dr. Ray. There we go. You can go back off camera now for a minute.
I was going to say, when you hear this meeting is being recorded, that's when you know to start. But here
It's
it
now
comes.
time.
So just warning you, here it comes.
It's all you, Sam.
Thank you.
You're on mute. There you go.
There we go. It's been a little while. Forgot how to use WebEx. Hello, everyone. Samantha Gamble-Sfar here. We are ready to get the impact meeting started. I'm going to start this meeting. First thing we'll do is we'll have a call of order. So see if we can meet our quorum today. We'll start with our co-chair, Dr. Ray.
Here.
Nurse practitioner Kevin Maxwell,
Hello.
nurse practitioner Sally Pham, I see her on the panel.
Yes, she's on the list, but I don't see or hear her, so we can skip for now.
Nurse practitioner Jan Johnson.
Griffin, here.
Thank you. Public member Betha Schnell, sorry.
She's not on yet, but she did mention that she was trying to join.
Okay, and then Dr. Espinoza.
Not heard from Dr. Espinoza.
Okay. And then I'm going to circle back to nurse practitioner Sally Pham. Okay. We are missing 3 people.
We have quorum.
I don't think we've met. We have quorum.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we just have
Okay,
quorum.
perfect. Just barely.
Just barely. Yeah.
Okay. Just barely. Okay, let's get started. The first thing we will have is I will have the moderator provide general instructions for the format of the teleconference, please.
Good afternoon. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature, now known as Slido. When the committee reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and send the request to unmute their microphone. The individual should be able to unmute and make their comments. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. I will also query our on-site location for comments as well. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you will be prompted to unmute. If your question can be answered, the committee will respond accordingly. When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important for the members to know. Please remember, committee members cannot address any item not on the agenda, items not on the agenda at that moment, items that you would like to add to a future meeting, or items that will be discussed later on the agenda will be discussed at their correct times during the meeting. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when committee members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute their microphone automatically.
Thank you, moderator. We will be moving on to the next agenda item 3.0, public comments for items not on the agenda, items for future agendas.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Gambles Farr, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. I am informed that we have no public representation in BRNHQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, we are at agenda item 4.0, review and vote on whether to approve the previous meeting's minutes. That was provided in the packet. I will give a brief moment for my fellow colleagues on the committee to give any updates that they may have or corrections. Okay, hearing none. Moderator, can you please open it for public comment, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Gamble Spar, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no public representation in BRNHQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would now like to review and call for a vote, please, if someone will put forth the motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
May I have a second?
I second the motion, Kevin Maxwell.
Thank you. I guess we will call for a vote.
That was Dr. Ray that made the motion. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you.
I myself, yay. Dr. Ray?
Yay.
NP Jan Johnson Griffin?
Yes.
NP Maxwell?
Yes.
Is Nurse Practitioner Sally Pham on the call yet? No, I don't
Oh,
see
I'm
her.
here. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Sorry. I've been trying to unmute myself.
okay, perfect. Did you want to
Actually,
vote
just one-
regarding the meetings?
One area of technicality, we do have to have her on camera in order to count her. So right now she is not on camera, so we will need her to be on camera. There we are. Oh, I saw her for a minute. There you are. Perfect. Now we
There
can
we go.
count her.
Thank you. Your vote, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are missing members, Dr. Espinoza and public member Betha Schnell. And so with that, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to 5.0, information only, we are going to receive a report from the BRN Executive Officer, Lori Melby. regarding activities as they've been happening since our last meeting. EO Melby, I will yield to you.
Thank you. So I know that the only thing that's really a large thing for us right now to focus on for nurse practitioners is the sunset bill. So our sunset bill, SB, 1302, is moving through the process. We do have language that has been introduced, but we fully expect it to continue to grow and morph and be amended. There, along with our sunset report that was posted and is on our website for review, there were about 33 asks from us, the board, to be able to sorry, I just got a message. So it looks like Betha is on and wants to be elevated. So board moderator, if you can elevate Betha Schnell, please. So you'll have her for quorum to count towards quorum, Sam. Thank you. So with that, there were several asks that are around APRN in general. So for both the midwife and the nurse practitioner, we asked to have furnishing privileges on licensure for the nurse midwife and the nurse practitioner. The requirements that we look at are identical. There's no additional information. So if you get a nurse practitioner, you're required to complete advanced pharmacology. The same with the nurse midwife. And that advanced pharmacology is the only requirement in order to meet the furnishing requirement for our license. So we wanted to streamline that process. We also asked for national certification for licensure as part of that request as well. And those are kind of the highlights for us. There's much, much more if you guys want to take a look at the sunset bill as it's moving through, and then take a look at the section 9 and 10 of our sunset report that is on our website. That's where you can find a lot of information. What typically occurs with legislation on a sunset year is they try not, and they as the legislator try not to have separate bills going through at the same time that our sunset bill is. So what you might see is a combining of those bills into our sunset bill. So there's only one kind of pathway through because it ends up being very extensive. So don't be discouraged if you don't see that your bill continues. It may pop up in our sunset bill. Anything other than that that you guys might have heard of or will have questions on, I'm here to answer any of those, but those are the highlights that I have to share around that here today.
Any questions from the committee members? Okay, I think we,
It's information only, so we would just go out to public comment.
yes. Moderator, would you like to open it for public comment, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public. See how they type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Campbell Spar, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in BRNHQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. We are going to have a discussion and possible action regarding the assignment and reassignment of members and/or topics to subcommittees and updates from the following subcommittees: Business and Profession section, Transition to Practice, and Discipline. We will first start with Business and Professions Code updates and reassignments.
Is this something that you want me to cover, Sam, or are you guys having report outs from the committees? I'm not
I
sure that-
believe, I don't think that there's anything to update honestly from that committee, but I just wanted to give that committee an opportunity to update if there was anything.
So is this the transition to practice committee that you're wanting to report out? Is that
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we don't have that. I'm sorry.
We do have
The
a
transition to practice.
practice. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Not a business and profession. Sorry. Business and professions. My apologies. I mean, transition to practice.
Transition to practice. All right, I believe that's my subcommittee.
Yes.
Yeah, we really have nothing to report, certainly since our last conversations, but keeping the line of communications open. And I think, Sally, did you have something you wanted to mention, what we talked about offline previously? And since then, we've gotten some information.
Yeah, Macaulay did clarify that if you're a 103 nurse practitioner and if you're still working under standardized procedures, that you will not be able to apply for 104.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification to Macaulay.
Yes, that's accurate. That was in part of the regulatory language that the NPAC voted on and put forth. The requirement to actually utilize the 103 certification was important, so that it justified kind of gaining that additional experience without the use of standardized procedures to move you towards that. And so when we implemented that in regulations and brought that through, that was something that was passed. And if you wanted to look at that, that is California Code of Regulations 1482.4. And in that section, in 1482.4, it does require that in number 14, proof of practice as a nurse practitioner pursuant to the section 103 of the code in good standing for at least 3 full-time equivalent years or 4,600 hours in direct patient care. So not only do you have to obtain a 103 certification, you must work in the role as a 103, providing direct patient care and maintain good status here at the board, not being disciplined, etc. So that is there. And then there's further explanation on 14A and 14B, where it talks about kind of acquiring those hours in different ways and what the good standing necessarily means. So I know that the 104 application was opened up in January. There is still some work that needs to be done on that 104 application. I'll apologize in advance and completely take ownership of that. The 104 application was built when we did the 103 application, and then SB 1451 was updated, and we did not catch that that application was not updated. So when we released it, it was in alignment with the prior law. So we do have a plan in place to get that updated. It is with our licensing department and is working through the IT process to get that addressed. But it does take some time. But in the meantime, there was some discussion with several stakeholders, as well as some applicants and licensees that was confused and thought that all they had to do was obtain certification and then hold that certification for 3 years to become a 104, that they did not necessarily need to utilize that certification, practicing, providing direct patient care, and then ultimately doing that without any additional complaints against their license to be able to move to the 104. So we have worked with CANP on getting out some FAQs on that. I'm sure there's more to do. We are answering questions that come in on that, but that was definitely one of the issues that seemed to be confusing for many. One of the other things, some of our transition to practice is still under debate within kind of the legislative process. There was the cleanup SB 1451 that removed a lot of the requirements that we had put into the transition to practice. And now I know that the ask is still there within our sunset and within the legislative personnel to review and potentially take into consideration. And some of the asks that I'm aware of right off the top of my head are that the 5-year that you work in practice as a NP within 5 years, to have those hours counted as you transition to practice. There's an ask to remove that 5-year recency. And so if you haven't worked as an NP in 8 years and you want those hours to count that are prior to what you did 8 years ago, they would like that to be counted. Additionally, another ask is that the transition to practice hours that are currently required to be done while they're licensed in California, the ask is to have that removed, and that those transition to practice hours can be done in any other state. Some of the issues that we see around that is just kind of on implementation basis, is every state has a different scope of practice. And so whether or not that state is able to have the same kind of experience, we would have to find a way to determine that, where we'd have to know the scope of practice in each one of the states. And then we would have to find a way to potentially attest to that. So there are things that are being discussed and moved, obviously, within our sunset bill. There is still some contention that goes on with whether or not our current transition to practice and the current requirement to work as a 103 to a 104 is something that organizations are in support of. And so we will go through that legislative process. We'll see if things change. And of course, we implement the law as written as we go forward. And if we have to update regs, then we update regs at that point. But the current transition to practice, the current requirement to work as a 103 in order to become a 104, and transition to practice being in state versus out of state is still required until statutory law changes. Any questions on that?
Thanks, Lori.
I have a question. So
Yes.
in the sunset.
Hey, Dr. Espinosa. We did not
Hi,
have you
all
here.
of
You're
you?
here.
Sorry about that.
Welcome.
So all the sunset to practice stuff that's in the on file, that covered some of the changes that related to the what you referred to, that 1482.4 proof of practice. Did that change? I unfortunately didn't realize that was in there, and I didn't read it.
It's not in there. It's not in there from us. It is not an ask from the California Board of Registered Nursing to have that changed. We stand by the regulations that we have written. Those were come from several voices and several organizations and public comment. And I really believe that the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee took all of those things into consideration. And a lot of times what I'm told a lot as serving this role as a public servant is, I'm not going to make everybody happy, but I'm going to find a path forward that ensures that there is some public safety. And so I believe that the regulations that were put forth by this advisory committee served a purpose of public protection and did not make everybody happy. I'm sure CMA was not happy. I'm sure CANP was not happy, but that is what was decided, and that's what was put forward, and that is current law. So that law has not changed, Dr. Espinosa. Those requirements still stand. What we are aware of is the conversations that are happening with legislative personnel for our sunset. So we have a sunset bill right now that is moving through that when the sunset process is going through, they reach out to several organizations, and organizations reach out to them, and they put in what they would like to see occur with our sunset bill. And I know that there have been some organizations that have reached out to have those limits that we put on in our regulations based on the feedback from the committee here and several, interested parties meetings and all this other kind of stuff in there removed. And so whether or not the legislative process will write that in and have those removed is yet to be seen. But if those are removed statutorily, then we will not be able to require them in a regulatory form. So we will wait and see how that goes through the process and see if things change by November. But if it doesn't change by November, then everything will stay status quo.
Oh, okay. And where can we read some of the organization's comments or concerns in the
So yeah, so what you'll do is our bill. So if you go to Ledge Info, let me kind of pull this up really quick and I'll walk you guys through this process. I'm going to share my screen for a second here. Just going to take 1 minute here. So there is a website called that I utilize frequently, and it's ledgeinfo.legislator.ca.gov. And then you can search in bills. Our sunset bill is SB 1302. And so if you choose that and go, you will see that this is our current bill today. And I always look at today's law as amended so I can see the red or strikeouts that of language that was there. And blue is the language that has been added new to this year. So you'll be able to see this. Now, when you go into the bill analysis right here, you can click on any of the bill analysis, and this is updated as it moves through Senate, it moves through Assembly. When it goes to appropriations, you'll see various bill analysis pop up. And then so you can read that, it will load and it will pull forward. I'm not sure if it's going to load while I'm here on camera, but then you could read what people have shared in support or opposition and kind of what's going on with that. And so that's where you can get a lot of that information.
Oh, okay.
If that's something that you're interested in seeing.
Yes.
I will try to I'm not sure if that is now showing the bill analysis on the screen. It should have popped up and transferred to that. And so it talks about existing law, and then you'll say what this bill does, and then you'll have comments, purpose, oversight hearing, review of the BRN, and it just kind of continues to go on. And so this is an 11-page document that they read and introduce, and then on the very bottom is typically where you'll see right here, support, California Association of Nurse Practitioners, California Association of Nurse Anesthesiology, opposition, none received. And you'll have arguments in support, you'll have author's amendment, etc. So those are some of the things that you'll be able to find. It is public and it is available for anybody to take a look at.
Okay, and it's AB 1302.
SB 1302.
SB.
Yes.
SB. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, E.O. Melby. Yeah, I think as with 1451, there was a lot of things that kind of changed, and so I think we'll continue to have updates as it relates to any additional things that need to be changed as a result of SB 1451. So
correct. When I first took this role, I would see a bill introduction language and I would get very kind of anxious and try to figure out how we're going to implement that. And I realized you don't do anything until it's signed, because you don't know what the bill is going to look like at the end. So stuff that I would work on at the beginning to possibly get ready for implementation never make it to the end. And so it becomes kind of a waste of my anxiety and focus on what that might need to be in advance. And so I just wait for it to kind of write it out and see where we land and then make the plan going forward at that point.
yeah, and understanding that this committee is not a static committee, that we work on as laws change and as practice change and recommendations change, that those things will need to be adjusted as needed. So now that we have a new law, then things will change as appropriate.
Yep.
I guess at this point in time, we will have our discipline report. Myself and nurse practitioner Sally Pham are on that committee. If we could bring up that information, I think we have it to bring up for review the discipline statistics?
It should be in our packet. I could pull that
Okay.
forward and share it if our moderator's not ready. Give me 1 second. I can pull it up in screen share. So let me pull in the.
Thank you.
Oh, it's in the slide. It says, okay, so we just moved forward to the slide.
Mhm.
If they just want to advance forward, it should be there. Trying to get that slide to advance. Sorry about that. I'm having a little bit of technical issues here, but should be able to advance that forward pretty quickly. If not, I will go ahead and screen share. It is on page
22.
22 of our current materials. And so why they are working on getting that, probably because I started screen sharing before. I will go ahead and screen share again so that we don't have to pause here. So hopefully,
Okay.
let me make sure this is large enough for you guys to see it on the screen here. And then you can talk about those stats.
Okay. I will yield the floor also to Sally. I guess we can just talk together as we kind
Yeah.
of review charts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you can see in 2018 until now, there has been quite a bit of increase in nurse practitioner overall, and actually there's an 82% increase. In terms of violations, you can see the number from 51 to 88%, while the number is looks like it's going up. But in terms of, because of the workforce was growing very fast, the rate of violations for NP remain extremely low. So if you look through time, from 2018 to 2026, the violations remain consistently below 0.25%. So we have an annual range typically of 0.15% to 0.21%. And even the largest years, in 2025, you only get a 0.22%. So overall, the NP workforce have added 20,000 new nurse practitioner over this period, but the violation rates stay flat, indicating a very stable professional conduct even with the rapid workforce growth. 2026, there's about 15 violation recorded through April 1st. It's not a comparable of a full year stat. Looking at in terms of levels of patterns, practice, outer state discipline, and convictions categories drive most variations years to year. And no category shows a proportional spike relative to the NP workforce growth. In conclusion, that despite the rapid expansion of NP workflow, the rate of violations per NP has remained stable and extremely low, 0.15 to 0.21%. Absolute violation increased modestly, but this rise is fully explained by the workforce growth. There is no evidence of increased per capita risk.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So does this data reflect the number of complaints that are actually filed? Because theoretically, if they always investigate the same number of complaints every year, that could artificially, lower these numbers. In other
No,
words,
I
the
think
number of
from
complaints goes up,
yeah.
but they only pursue, they only have the manpower to pursue, say, 100 complaints a year. Then of course it's going to look like a low number of violations. I'm just playing devil's advocate here on behalf of the public.
Mhm.
Tell me what
Yeah.
I'm missing.
I can jump
Yeah.
in actually.
Yeah, I
So
know.
it's not reflective of complaints received. There are times we receive spikes of complaints, especially now with social media. There was one time I believe we came back from a weekend, we over 3,000 complaints on a single licensee. And that's because it became a viral incident that was social media based. And so if we receive 3,000 complaints on the same licensee and the same complaint, we close all but one of them as redundant. and we investigate the one because that is the issue, the same singular issue that's being complained about. And so it is not reflective of complaints. However, each complaint that is received is investigated in some way. Does it get to a full investigation? No, not always, but it's not based on licensee or license type or complaint. It's if we get a criminal case that is being adjudicated, then there's less of an investigation that we have to do. So we might not put a full investigation out to that because it's being adjudicated through the legal process, and we'll take action based on that. If it's an out-of-state discipline that we take action on, that disciplinary investigation has already occurred. So we then do not have to investigate that. We just take action on the discipline that happened in that state to ensure that if there was a chance that that licensee who potentially was disciplined in Utah decides to work in California, that their license is disciplined the same in our state as it was in Utah, so that they don't inadvertently have an ability to practice with an unrestricted license in our state if they did something that was of great concern in Utah. Also, we do receive some complaints that don't rise to the level of a investigation. It could be an HR issue. It could be a divorce proceeding issue. It could be something that is not under our jurisdiction. And it's not a direct violation of the Nurse Practice Act. So if we get a complaint that says your licensee is a terrible parent, but it's not something that we can substantiate through an investigatory process, it may not lead to discipline on the license type. But if we get a complaint that says this nurse practitioner who is a parent is prescribing medicine to their child and is practicing beyond something, then we would absolutely investigate that, because that would be a violation of our Nurse Practice Act, and we would have to take means to look at that. But there are times where we get complaints that come in that aren't something that we would investigate because it's not under our jurisdiction. There are times where, as an RN, we'll get a complaint that says this person worked out of staffing ratio. Well, it's not. Our staffing ratios are not our law, so we would not discipline that necessarily unless there was some harm that occurred, and several other things that go into that. So any complaint that is received that warrants an investigation by the Board of Registered Nursing will be investigated, whether it meets it all the way out to the to a very extensive investigation that involves the Division of Investigation and getting put through to the Attorney General's office for discipline is something that is completely not related to the amount of complaints received. So
That's helpful. Yeah, that was really what I was asking.
Yeah, and then in our sunset report, on our sunset report, you can actually go and pull the data, and it does show that recently, in prior probably 2-3 years, we've investigated 100% of the complaints that have been received. So that is not typical for us, and we do have some staffing limitations, but due to staffing limitation, that does not determine whether or not we investigate. We have a duty to investigate regardless of what kind of staffing issues that we may be facing.
May I ask can I ask a couple follow-up questions?
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay. So I would be curious, because I have no baseline of comparison, how this compares to physician percent violations or PA. If we have any type of comparison point, is always helpful for a benchmark. I mean, it seems extremely low, so not to worry about it. But again, it also seems like benchmarking would help. And then my second question, which I know is most likely out of our purview because we're not a physician quality committee, but for the public, I know in my industry, in my healthcare system, the worry is more about quality. It's not about these types of like sexual harassment type of concerns. It's more about is there an increase in malpractice claims? Is there an increase in extremely bad actions or bad outcomes? Excuse me. So I'm assuming you're going to say that's out of our purview, but as a consumer, it worries me a little that I don't know where that is tracked or how that's being tracked.
Yeah. So what I can do is the 801 practice right here that you see on the screen.
Mhm.
Those are insurance claims. So those
Oh,
are your malpractice claims and stuff that come through. So we do track that. You can see that that is not something that has increased at all. The insurance claims come to us when they're over a specific amount, and that has not changed. Practice related cases, that's the one that you were kind of referencing, I believe, too, outside of like your malpractice and stuff, is the top line here. And you could see that even the practice violations have not seen a sharp increase. Now, when we do look at this, we benchmark to other APRNs. We do not benchmark to physicians because that is outside of our jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction over nurse midwives, nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, as well as nurse anesthetist. And so we do tend to look at that against our other licensees and not compare that across boards or across practice locations, because our practice varies immensely from APRN to APRN. It would be even more of a kind of a leap to go from NP to PA or NP to MD.
Okay, so no benchmark. It might be just helpful.
APRNs, not benchmarks with physicians. That's accurate, but benchmark with APRNs.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And just moving, can you pull that slide back up? Because that was the next slide we were going to talk about. So in our report, one of the things that we thought about is one of the questions we knew that would likely come up as a result of this MP discipline statistics is comparison or adjustments of once the 104 MPs are fully in place. And 103 MPs, trying to segue out that information perhaps to see where those different things are. But I agree with E.O. Melby. I think comparing apples to apples is important. I think it's kind of difficult to try to grasp that information from other professions. I think comparatively, it's important for us to stay in alignment with APRN practice or nurse practitioner practice. As
The laws are immensely different. I mean, that's something we really need to put out there. The governing laws are immensely different, and the practice is therefore different.
Yeah.
And so
totally understand just from someone who runs an operations, and when the rubber meets the road, you're comparing them side by side. So I know in the law and the policy, in theory, what we can do here, you're right. But I'm just, I'm representing also what it's like to run an integrated delivery system. And these people are going to be working alongside and as if they are doctors. And in every other way, they will be benchmarked like doctors in the real world. So
yeah, there are studies outside of us. There are studies outside of us, because that's where we would leap out of our jurisdiction as the California Board of Registered Nursing. So there are several studies out there that do look at exactly what you're asking for, Betha, and they're available. They're publicly reviewable. They're utilized by several organizations to kind of support the APRN roles, and really are something that is done by, we are not at our board a research-based boards, and when you get into stuff that is as detailed and nuanced as that, you would want to have a specific research team to look at that from a practice perspective, and you would want to even go outside of California. You would want to look at the broader national level. And so there are many studies out there. There's tons of research out there. It is available. It is not under our purview to do that. And so we report what we have jurisdiction over, and that is our APRNs. And so that is why this data is here and usable. And then I brought the screen back up for you, Sam, or you'll see it.
Thank you. Thank you. So, what you guys are, I'm sorry, there was someone else who was speaking, I think. I don't know if it was, oh, Dr. Espinoza, I see your hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a question. I think things we're just discussing will change, and probably as we start seeing more 104s and more 103s, that probably some of that is going to bring in, and some of those benchmarks will be more related to what the benchmarks are for physicians and practicing. So I think that's we're probably in a place that it's not, we don't have the knowledge or understanding where that's going to go. But I think that in the future probably will change, just to bring up the concern that Ms. Snellen had. I agree with her concerns, but I think that we're going to see that as time goes on.
So I think that warrants kind of a greater discussion and kind of understanding. And so I'll take a second right now to kind of dive into that just a little bit. The scope of practice of the nurse practitioner hasn't changed. And so they're not practicing differently. They're not practicing more. Their education and training, certification, et cetera, is stagnant. It has not changed. So we do not anticipate any kind of threat to the public with this change going forward. What has changed is the various leveling of supervision. And so I'll get into that really quick. Your traditional NP is your NP that works within a licensed healthcare facility and has standardized procedures. Those standardized procedures are developed between the healthcare facility, the APRN or RN that is utilizing those standardized procedures, and a physician. And they must incorporate 11 areas within that standardized procedure. It's important to note that of the 45,000 NPs that we have in our state, greater than 42,000 still work in this role. There has only been about 3,000 nurse practitioners that have moved into the status of 103. So we have 42,000 standardized procedure NPs that have been practicing this way in the state and have stayed in that same practice setup in this state. Of the 3,000 that became a 103, the employers do not have to work them as a 103, and that is the barrier that the 103 NPs are facing. Is even though they carry a certification as a 103 from the Board of Registered Nursing, and that would allow them to work in specified group settings with at least one physician and surgeon, still following policies and procedures, but not a standardized procedure that is overseen by the Board of Registered Nursing. Employers are choosing not to do that. So even our certified 103s are not working as a certified 103. They are continuing to work as a nurse practitioner under standardized procedures. Additionally, when you look at a 103 that is granted a 103 certification, although it doesn't change their scope of practice, it limits their practice setting. They are only allowed to be in a medical-based organization. And medical-based means something in our law. That means it has to be 51% owned by a physician. And you are required to work with at least one physician and surgeon when you are not working with standardized procedures. So as a 103, when you are utilizing that to not work with standardized procedures, there are still several safety measures put into place that were put in by legislation that we were not able to adjust, alter, or change in regulation. So that is still a requirement and has not changed. Just in January, we have our first 104. That 104 is a nurse practitioner that, again, doesn't change their scope of practice. They are now able to work in any setting that they choose to, but now it actually limits their ability to practice. And what that 104 does, when it limits the ability to practice, it says that if you were educated as a pediatric nurse practitioner and you have a national certification as a pediatric nurse practitioner, you are only able to provide services as a pediatric nurse practitioner. It limits you in your ability to work. You may have been a pediatric nurse practitioner that worked as a liver and GI NP treating adults under standardized procedures or within your group setting. That is no longer allowed as a 104. You are limited within your education, your training, and your national certification. So I know that there is a fear that there has been some kind of ability to expand scope of practice on nurse practitioners that could potentially lead to a increase in discipline. But with the way the law was written, even that advancement to an independent practice is incredibly limiting to our nurse practitioners and keep them in a very small kind of focus, which is in alignment with their education,
Yeah,
training, and national certification. And it is
if
not something that is expansive.
If I may, I'm guessing we all understand that. I don't think I was suggesting they're going out of scope, but when they're moving to a new relationship with a physician that's less oversight, or a different relationship with a supervisory physician that's lighter or non-existent, that's where the difference is, that I would think the tracking would be useful. But no, I don't think any of us thought scope expanded by this bill. I didn't mean to imply that.
We are tracking that. We have not seen any change. If we do, we would report that out. But one thing that I'll take this a chance to kind of just share some information that may not be known to the greater public, which I think is important, is the level of physician supervision with the standardized procedure NP is varied immensely from physician to physician. And there are many times where it is just kind of called in. It's a name, and it is not somebody that is actually doing any supervision or doing anything that they have outlined in that standard procedure. And when we receive complaints, a lot of times we receive complaints and that supervision is not there or established, and that already is current. So again, when knowing the complaints and knowing the type of investigations and stuff that we see here, I don't foresee that there's going to be a difference, because it comes down to the practice of the NP and the relationship with the other healthcare providers, and that we cannot dictate. And there are some providers that are honest and follow everything to a T, and there are some providers that will take a payment and give a name, and that is not something that is condoned by us, but we do understand that it occurs, and when that is found, we do discipline. And we also turn that complaint over to the med board for medical board to discipline when that occurs as well. So both practitioners that are involved in that, where they're not working the way that they should be working in that collaborative agreement with or without standardized procedures, would receive some disciplinary action, and it could be reported here on the nurse practitioner level if we were to see that spike, and we have not yet.
NP fam, you've been trying to address the committee.
Thank you. I agree. I've been tracking in terms of our discipline process, and there has not been an increase. And as of early April, we have 3,800 nurse practitioner. Our scope has not changed. Our scope will not change from whether we're working under standardized procedures, 103 in medical setting without it, or as independent 104. So I do not see the increase of it, and specifically the 103, when we're looking at violation, the 801 practice is $10,000 when someone has to pay in terms of malpractice, just 10,000, which is very minimal, right? And if you look across, and there's actually been pretty much a trend of almost a decrease. In terms of complaints, we did previously had a sessions where and we were provided the information that on average the Board of Nursing gets about 6 to 8,000 complaints, and they do investigate every one of them. And this is just in complaints. The physicians gets about 10,000, and only 20% of them do get investigated or dive into. So it is a huge difference how our board manage the complaints that come in versus the medical board. So in terms of if you're looking at how safe nurse practitioners are, again, our scope is not changing. Our setting maybe is changing based on the category we're in, but we do not see, I do not see any statistically any significant, when we're looking at how safe nurse practitioners are.
Thank you, Sally. I concur with everything you said. We've been looking at these numbers and we will continue to look at these numbers because we absolutely want to make sure that we are providing the information that the public wants to know to ensure that, we're looking at trends, which is something that we definitely talked about we wanted to do in establishing this discipline section of the reports. So, the statistics are there. I think the other thing is if we want to scroll down, I think my colleague already talked about this, the amount of monitoring that's actually happening as it relates to the active licenses per year. And we're literally talking about less than 4,000 nurse practitioners when you're thinking about that we have 46,000 nurse practitioners in the state right now. And so we look hopefully as that number continues to uptrend, because that's actually the purpose of the transition to practice bill. That was the entire purpose, was to increase the amount of nurse practitioners that could serve the public in the much needed areas, at risk rural areas. And so we're looking at that as well. And so we'll continue to trend this and continue to report out as the numbers continue to grow and give more specificity as it relates to MP 103s and 104s as needed moving forward. And I guess with that, I guess I will ask if there's any other comments from the committee, and then I'm hoping to open this up to the public. Okay, hearing none, moderator, will you please open it up to public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Gambles Farr, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in BRN HQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to make a final comment on this. If we were to see a trend of increase, it will be across the board in terms of when it comes to practice, in terms of safety. The reason why is that we have to remember that because of the pandemic, that the training was, not in person for all fields, right? For whether it's nursing, PAs, or for medical residency. And so if we were to see a trend of any increase, whether it's in the board of for nurses or for nurse practitioners or for PAs and physicians, it would have been due to a historical event that caused that we could attribute it to, because even now you could see those are whether it's they just need a little bit more handholding, right? The surgeons that graduate during the period where they didn't have the surgeries, they weren't practicing as much, and so forth. So that's why if there was an increase in trend, we could always attribute back, and it would be across the board for all specialties.
Thank you, MP Fam. Okay, let's move on to the next subject matter. We will be moving on to.
I have one more question, one more comment.
I'm sorry.
May I speak? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important, at least listening to the discussion, that we realize I don't think anybody is questioning the nurse practitioner's scope of practice or how they're practicing or are there
Correct.
mistakes. I don't think that's at all the question. I think the question that I'm thinking of is more that relationship is going to change. A 1 of 4, and we don't see that. We only have one right now. We're not going to see it until down the line, just like we see it with physicians. Things change, whatever changes in the practice. I think we're going to see changes, whether it happens anything in nurse practitioner and maybe just happens in physicians. It's still, we have to still see. I mean, we know that nurse practitioners are going to be under a different
setting. Dr. Espinoza, there's 54104 now. Not one, but 54.
Okay, I heard wrong. I thought it was one.
Okay, and the other
Okay.
thing is we are absolutely tracking it. We want the
that's
public.
good.
Yeah, we are
That's
absolutely tracking it. And if we see any data, we will report it out.
Absolutely.
Oh, no. Again, it's not about anybody making errors as much as it's going to change in a sense that they are independent. I don't know if this is true or not, but I do hear this a lot, that when you work with a physician in collaboration or you're working under standardized procedures, when somebody gets sued, it's the physician who gets sued, even if it had nothing to do with the physician. It goes to the supervising physician. Is it ever brought up to the nursing board? I don't know.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, I'm not an
That's what I'm saying.
attorney.
I don't know.
No. Usually, I mean, in the cases that I know of, usually when somebody gets sued, everybody's called in, right? So I'm not sure if there's just one person. I don't think that's true, but that goes off topic, right? The topic is we have 103, right? We have nurse practitioner practice under standardized procedure 103 and 104. And we want the public to be safe, and I absolutely feel the public will be safe, and that it would, and we're tracking these numbers. If there's if there was a picture that was emerging that was different, then we will be here presenting those data to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to note that the liability of a nurse practitioner is the same as any other provider. Nurse practitioners can get sued just like their supervising physicians can get sued just as well. The liability and the responsibility to the public as it relates to professional conduct is the same.
And I'm not trying to be adversarial.
No, I don't see it that way,
Yeah,
Dr.
here.
Espinoza, at all.
We don't see it that way. We want you to know that we are monitoring this too. We to reassure you that if there's anything different, then we will definitely report out.
Okay.
Perhaps, I guess the question being that I would ask you, Dr. Espinoza, what do you feel needs to be done that's not being done right now?
Oh, nothing. I just was commenting related to Ms. Sellen's question, because the relationship in with other providers and the institution does change. Like some of the limitations right now that the hospitals put on, where they are not quite ready to allow them to practice their full scope as they could. And so I support that these things change in favor of our nurse practitioners that are 104s or 103s. I just was commenting that something changes. It has to change, just like any relationship. When we go into a new a new setting, that those relationships change, and how that will be, it's something we might be looking at, not necessarily from the point of view what did they do wrong as much as how has the medical system changed in light of having a 104. And I'm glad that you're taking track of that, but I was thinking more of the overall, how is it going to change? And will some of these people that are working in that medical setting see the nurse practitioners, for example, or change the rules for changing the rules, meaning that you can practice your full scope of practice. So I'm advocating for those things to happen. But I just want to see that we're observing that we can't say this is what it is right now, because we are going to see some changes, and all of them, I hope, is going to be positive, not negative. But if we keep our eyes closed to those changes, sometimes we may not be helping the nurse practitioner. And that's where I want to go. I don't want to go to the place of, what are the nurse practitioners doing wrong? Just because we're talking about, disciplining, that's going to
No,
be.
and I
So-
think I want to state one statement is that this is not something that's new. There are 26 states and the District of Columbia that has full practice independent authority. And although we are doing a transition to practice, independent practice for nurse practitioners is not something new. It's something new to California. And I think we can use a lot of those states and a lot of that precedent to utilize and leverage some of the things that we may see within our state and learn lessons from other states as well as it relates to our transition of practice. So I think that everyone on this committee does have their eyes open and working in the best interest of the community to make sure that everybody is providing, but particularly for the people that we are charged with, nurse practitioners, are providing safe, efficient, quality care. And so that's all everybody wants. So I think we're all saying the same thing.
I'm going to
make
jump
a
in
very
really quick. Sorry, go for it, Dr.
Yes.
Ray, and then I'll jump in
Oh.
to address one of the concerns that Dr. Espinosa had, but go for it.
Sure. Sorry. So first of all, Samantha and Sally, thank you for presenting this. I think this is great, and we should continue to track this. I think we should all be a little careful about drawing any conclusions from, isolated data and trying to compare it to other professions. That's not really the job of this committee. And if you really wanted to do that, you would have to do a deeper dive into what are the nature of the complaints? You would expect that nurse practitioners are going to get different kinds of complaints than physicians before making any conclusions about the percentage of complaints that are investigated by different boards. I think that's inappropriate, and we would need a lot more data to really make an intelligent comment about that. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And then one of the things that was brought up about the 801 reporting. The 801 reporting, we receive that on all of our licensees, including our RNs. And so if there is something that is reported out as a settlement, it will say that this settlement occurred and $10,000 was paid off on behalf of the RN. Or it'll say this settlement occurred, it was $500,000 and $400,000 of that was paid out on behalf of the RN, and only $100,000 was paid off on behalf of the physician. That's the detail level that we get when we get that turned over to us, is when that insurance payout occurs, it tells us what parts are delineated out to the different license types. And then based on that, we do the investigation. So if there's a payout that comes in and it is a payout that includes a nurse practitioner as well as an RN, as well as a physician, then that information gets shared to all of our boards, and we investigate the nurse practitioner as well as the RN, and we make sure that medical board has the same complaint that we have so that they can investigate that. So it is, when we get an insurance payout, we do know what licensee it was paid out to and what part of that settlement was paid out specifically for that license type that received it. So just to provide that clarification when we get those complaints that come in on the 801 reporting.
And may I make one last
Thank
comment?
you.
I'm sure we have to move on. Would it be okay?
Yes, please.
May I make one last comment?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. Couldn't tell if you could hear me. Thank you. I appreciate, I mean, this is helpful for me. I think what I struggle with a little bit is if I'm in the role of consumer protection, all I know is my own world, which is running operations in an integrated delivery system. And so when we're reviewing data and I have no context of the research, what's happening in other states, what's been written up, and then this is not a research board. I'm not sure I feel as prepared as I should or educated as I should to comment intelligibly. And I want to do the best job I can for this board. But I can only use my own context, and what you do in my world is you benchmark. That's how you determine, how providers compare, or, and so again, I know there's no easy answer because I've been told repeatedly, we don't do research here. We don't share research. We don't, but it is hard when you have no context of that, so.
Thank you. I'm just going to, if there's no other comments, I'm just going to make one final comment before we move on. Perhaps there is an opportunity for us to, I know for myself, I do a lot of independent research on my own with trusted entities. And perhaps if I could give some suggestion, that would be something, because there, like E.O. Melby said, there's lots of benchmarks that are out there related to all the subject matter that we've spoken of. I'd be more than happy to provide any of that information if that's allowed. E.O. Melby, I'd be more than happy to provide any information, or perhaps that can come from the BRN. I don't know exactly where that needs to come from to help and assist, but I guess we can continue that discussion, or however that's best met, so that perhaps the same information and knowledge base is provided to everybody who's sitting on the committee.
Samantha, do you mind just clarifying what you're talking about? Like what kind of research you're talking about?
No, in what she was saying, benchmarking and things like that, we've been discussing. So Betha was asking those specific questions. And
Studies related to the quality
studies
outcomes
related to the
related
quality outcomes.
Right. We mentioned 26 other states have been doing this much longer than us, and they surely have lots of information about what the benefits, minuses, but none of us know that. We've never been given that as an orientation. So I would greatly appreciate that. That would be super valuable, but I leave it to the BRN if it's allowed.
I mean, I guess my question is, what are we going to do with that data? Like, how does it fulfill any of our obligations on this committee? Like, are we delivering this to the board? And what are we doing with that data?
For me, it helps me make more informed comments and decisions and discussions that are outside of my regular purview of being an operator. It just gives me more information and background to make and be a better board member.
And I mean, like, let's say your conclusion is that in some states, there are better outcomes with physicians than nurse practitioners, and in some states it's the opposite. How does that? I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here because
I
we're
would
using
not be
taxpayer time
providing any
here to make these
information
meetings.
comparing professions. It would be all related to nurse practitioner practice. It would not be comparative at all.
Then what are we benchmarking against? Because Betha sounds like she's pushing for more information about.
So it's not benchmarking. I said providing additional information and research that has been done. So I'm not preparing to benchmark against anything. It's specifically I guess what needs to happen honestly is, and perhaps for myself, I do a lot of my own independent reading, independent studying, looking up the bills, looking up whatever's coming along California as it relates to nurse practitioner practice. And that's just my particular purview of how I keep up. And I don't know, that's my only suggestion to anybody else.
No, I understand all that. I'm just trying to figure out, like, usually when you're doing a study, you have kind of a hypothesis. What is the hypothesis that we're trying to prove or disprove?
I'm not trying to disprove any type of a hypothesis. It's not a research that I'm trying to do independently. I'm just trying to provide her with some information.
Okay, I guess I'm just confused about what the information is, but okay, we can move on. I mean, we don't have to belabor it.
Okay, barring no additional discussion, I'm going to move on to discussion 7.0. Update on the board regarding discussion of statutory limitations for nurse practitioners and advanced practice providers for independently compounding medications. This will be provided by EO Melby.
My computer's moving slowly, so hopefully I'm not too choppy. This actually tends to be a much more controversial subject than the last one. So we'll try to set the stage here of kind of what occurred and what some of the asks are, and really provide some additional information. So at the last NPAC meeting, we actually discussed compounding, what compounding meant, and that RNs as well as APRNs are not able to compound. For some additional clarification, that is not necessarily a BRN standalone law. That is, compounding laws in the state of California are from the pharmacy board, as you would expect, not an individual board. The pharmacy board makes regulations based on, let me start over. There is a USP pharmacy compounding law that is at the federal level, and the pharmacy board can adopt that directly over, or as you go from federal to state, you can narrow that scope that was potentially allowed at a federal level. Our pharmacy board chose to define in regulations what immediate use compounding is. And immediate use compounding is in, and I just want to pull it up to make sure I have it for you, and I could give that to you right off the top of my head, 16 CCR 1736.1. And in that, it talks about immediate administration, which is under B1. It says, except as allowed in paragraph 2 and 3, CSP, for direct and immediate administration as provided in the USP, Chapter 797, shall only be compounded in those limited situations where the failure to administer such CSP could result in loss of life or intense suffering of an identifiable patient. Any such compounding shall be only in such quantity as is necessary to meet the immediate need of the patient. If not already documented in the patient's medical record, documentation for each CSP shall also include the compounded date and time, the patient's name and patient's unique identifier, and the circumstances causing the immediate need of that patient. Such documentation need not be redocumented by the compounding staff if already available. It also has a call out that has to be delivered and administered to that single patient for within 4 hours, etc. So why is that important? With the of med spa IV hydration clinics, nurses and APRNs are compounding, and it is not allowable. There are 2 providers in the state of California that are allowed to compound, and that is a physician or I'm sorry. It's very, very blotchy on my end. I apologize for that. So with that, we brought in some listserv messaging, as well as some social media messaging, some website updates. We presented it to our board, and it created quite a stir, as you would expect, because it is affecting our RNs as well as our APRNs, because they were not aware of the difference between admixing, which is following the manufacturer's recommendations, and compounding, which is even combining of 2 meds, because that's not on the manufacturer's label. So there are common RN practices that people do when they're starting an IV, where they mix 2 meds before they inject it in and then start the IV. That is done in our day-to-day practice. That is essentially what is considered compounding. So it was asked by our chair to bring this forward and provide that information to this group for further conversation, to ensure that we are kind of all on the same page. I know that there have been several lobbyists and other organizations talking to legislative staff on how maybe this can be addressed, maybe addressed in limited situations where it's within a hospital setting or something and outside of a clinic or that. But with that immediate use compounding, where that would be typically seen that is allowable by our APRN would be maybe with a certified registered nurse anesthetist in an operative setting where they would combine up to 3 sterile agents, one of them being an IV bag, to give that medication to that patient on that table as directed. That immediate use compounding that is put out by the pharmacy board would not qualify for any outpatient setting, as there would not be a incident where it would be life or limb sparing. You would be calling 911 in advance and getting that out and following your procedures that you have with those outpatient settings. So open for conversation. I know it's been pretty controversial as this messaging has been going out. We have held the updating to our website, but it doesn't mean we will not be putting it out. It just means that we're working to make sure we have a greater understanding of the impact of that before it is clarified and released. I know that CANP has asked, as part of their sunset support, they've also asked for this compounding issue to be addressed in our sunset. I'm not sure what that will look like and if it could, but as what I need to make perfectly clear is that it's a pharmacy law, not a California BRN law. We do have a statement in our law that it says RN shall not cannot compound, and that is accurate. That is not in conflict with the pharmacy board. That actually just kind of further defines in our practice that we cannot. But if there were a change where potentially RNs could compound in limited situations, it would still not open up to the IV hydration med spa arena, because the pharmacy board still has the requirement that immediate use compounding could only be done in a life or limb sparing incident. So there would have to be different laws that would have to take into consideration, which would be the pharmacy board would have to probably change theirs as well as ours in order for anything to kind of move forward in that direction.
Lori,
Dr.
Yes,
Ray.
Dr. Ray.
what are the proposed changes? You said that there may be some changes that are proposed for the sunset bill. What
Yeah,
if
our
anything
board
would you
has
change?
Our board has not asked for any changes. We have not asked for it. That is, again, that the compounding laws are within the pharmacy board. Even when we discussed this in our board meeting, the reach out for further discussion was with the pharmacy board to ensure that the interpretation that they provided me was in fact accurate. And so it is, and it went through a big regulatory process. It was out to comment period and such, and people had made comments. We do know that organizations are asking for it to be loosened up or to allow APRNs the ability to compound, but that is not something that is that was not an ask from our board. Our board did not ask for that.
So that's where the controversy really is.
That is, yeah. Well,
Got it.
and there is some controversy out there because, and we're planning to do education out to our academic institutions as well. including pre-licensure RN as well as APRN academic institutions, because what we're finding is many practitioners do not know the difference between compounding and admixing. And so, they are routinely, I know the one that I was taught in nursing school was the administration of insulin, where you draw it up clear to cloudy, right? It's two separate medications drawn into the same syringe. And the technical definition of that is compounding. So that is not allowed in our state under that technical definition. And so when you look at something like that, where it includes in the definition of compounding that you cannot deviate from the manufacturer's recommendation on how you administer that medication as a single drug, then you are now combining that as two separate drugs into one. That is essentially compounding. When you look at it from that capacity, there may be a need to have this looked at and flushed out, and because there are many common practices that are done daily that really do serve the patient, to allow for your RN or APRN to do some limited compounding where you would, put them into the same syringe, and then specific medication formularies that you would be able to follow. But currently there is not a call out for that. And so it is very clear in the pharmacy law that no compounding is done by anybody other than a pharmacist or a physician. And practice-wise, that is not always the most conducive thing to do, right? So that's where there needs to be more definition. There needs to be more call outs. There needs to be a change or an update to support current practice, but that is not something that our board has taken on as an ask. Our board has taken on education and providing people information on what truly admixing is and what truly compounding is, so that they can voluntarily adjust their scope and their practice, not adjust their scope, let me correct that, adjust their practice to not fall outside of the scope. Because with the increase in med spa IV hydration clinics, we do have an increase in complaints coming in around RNs and APRNs that are compounding following standardized procedures. Because that's another thing too, is in the standardized procedure, it says if a patient presents with a headache and also says that they're tired, that you can start this IV and you can give them this medication and this vitamin that would then help them with their headache and them being tired. And they mix it right there on site, and that is compounding, and that is not allowed. And so our board does not have the ability to inspect in that manner, but pharmacy does. And what brought this to our attention is, as pharmacy board was going out and doing these inspections that they are legally able to do, they would ask the people at the clinics, where is the area that you prepare your medications? They would bring them into the med board. They'd have the little red square on their countertop, and it would be clean and taken care of. And then they would mix the medication according to the standardized procedure, and they would go out and administer it to the patient that is receiving it. And they did it appropriately. They did it well, and they were happy to show them exactly what they did. And what that told us is that nobody was trying to hide anything, because they didn't understand that it was outside of their scope. So that is where we decided as a board to take a very proactive approach and just really provide the education, get that out there, because what our understanding is we don't believe our RNs or APRNs were aware that they were doing something that was beyond their scope, that did go over into the practice that is specific to a physician or a pharmacist. And that even if a physician in standardized procedures delegated that to you, they cannot. Even if it was an order that was written that says, please administer these two meds in a single syringe to be one injection, the nurse at that point still cannot follow that. And so those were some of the questions that we were getting in, where they're like, well, I was told to, or I followed the standardized procedure, et cetera. You're still not allowed to do it. It's truly beyond your scope. Even so, if you're told to practice surgery and it was in your standardized procedure, you could practice surgery, you're still not allowed to practice surgery, right? I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's the conversation that we decided to have with providing education and being proactive in that, so that we're not always having to investigate and discipline. That either there is a active pursuit of a law change to allow for RNs and APRNs to do some limited compounding in specific situations, or that we make sure that our RNs and APRNs are aware that they absolutely cannot do that, and they stop doing that and find other ways around that, including pharmaceutical companies maybe stepping up and combining common medications that are used in that manner and having them in prepackaged vials, so that then we can administer them, because that is what an RN and APRN can do, is they can administer, they cannot compound.
Dr. Espinoza, you have your hand up.
Yes, just one comment. The physicians are able to compound, but it is very limited as well. So physician comment is what I was looking at up. It says regulated by the state medical board instead of the FDA or the pharmacy board. So, but it's very, very narrow. And if they compound, they could only give it to their own patient. They can't make it and then give it to other physicians or anybody else to administer. You can only administer it to the patient you made it for. And so they, it says, if we go beyond that, we're going beyond our scope of practice. But it's the medical board that put those limitations or made that compounding. So we're not allowed to compound in general, very, very, very narrow. But maybe we should look at how narrowly if the medical board is regulating it for the physician, maybe we need to look at it, how can we regulate it for the nursing board or by the nursing board.
Yeah, and I believe that that's the conversation at the legislative level, because it would have to be something that would change legislatively. It's not a regulatory change that we would do, because in our statute, which determines regulation, it says RNs cannot compound.
So
So we as a board cannot change that. That has to be done legislatively.
Okay, so there's no, but just to, I just want to let people know that the scope for practice for physician isn't that wide either for compounding.
Yeah, so I mean, I think when people commonly think about compounding, they truly picture like a scientific laboratory changing constitution, the methods, removing things from the makeup that potentially would cause an allergy to a patient, that you would want to have a different base solution or something to that effect, or compounding it in a way that if somebody had like a fluid restriction or something, you would make it in a very small amount of diluent and have a larger amount of medication in there, so you could kind of accommodate that. And so those are kind of common things of compounding that I believe people think of, but they don't, which then makes them not liken that to current practice, where I'm just drawing up insulin cleared cloudy and injecting it, not realizing that's actually technically compounding and not something that our law supports us doing, even though it's a very common practice that is done. So I think there is room for some change or call out. I don't know what that looks like or how that is done, but our job right now is to get the information out so that our licensees understand what the current scope of practice is and what the confines are. And it is a pharmacy law. It is not specifically our law. And if we get a complaint that an RN or APRN is doing it, we can't say, well, we know that many people are doing this and it's very commonly done. So we're not going to discipline. Like it is a violation. So we would have to discipline and we have to do that investigation to follow that through. We don't have an option for that. So because we know that that practice is out there and we are starting to see more and more complaints, we do anticipate that more and more of our licensees will end up disciplined without this knowledge and their ability to kind of alter their practice as it currently is done.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So are we seeing complaints increase because they're doing it or because people are being harmed, or both?
A little bit of both. Less harm, okay, so less patient harm. What we tend to see that I truly still believe is harmful is predatory companies attaching themselves to our licensees saying, you are able to do this. And I'm going to give you the structure in which you are able to do this. And because our licensees are not aware that they are not able to do this, they take the fall of that predatory company because that predatory company is a business or a company outside of our jurisdiction. And so when it's our licensee that is doing it, set up through a business that is predatory in nature, that is utilizing these providers to do that, I still see that as harm. It's not necessarily harm to the patient, right? But I truly believe it is harm to the practice of our licensees, the credibility of our licensees. And if a licensee ends up receiving discipline based on that, because you're not able to kind of claim ignorance, like I didn't know that that was the law, because you're required when you receive our license to know the law. And so if you've got a company that says, sign up with me, I'm going to show you at this seminar how this is done. You can be an independent practitioner and you're going to make thousands and thousands of dollars. And all you have to do is have this structure. I'm going to set you up on how to start your business. And I'm going to give you a physician to oversee you. And I'm going to write your standardized procedures. And you just have to do this. And now you're going to be a gazillionaire. When it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. However, they've been successful in doing that. And the business that does that is not the one being held accountable to it. It's the practitioner that's actually doing it that doesn't realize that they should not be doing it because they've been promised this kind of mecca that doesn't exist. And so no real increase to harm to patients, but definitely I believe it's very harmful to our licensees who are not aware.
So legislatively, would they have to change just the BRN scope? Or would the pharmacy board also have to acquiesce and allow us to have the ability to compound?
There would probably have to be some like multi-level attention to this. I'm not an expert at that because I know our law. I don't know the other laws in and out. But it would have to be something probably similar to what the med board has done to allow for that. And then there would have to be a provision in the pharmacy law that would probably allow for that as well. But again, it comes down to the definition of what is allowable to be compounded, and that is for that immediate use. And that immediate use is defined in pharmacy law as life or limb sparing. And so again, that will never happen in a med spa, IV hydration, hangover clinic, whatever you want to call it, situation. There is nothing there that is going to be life or limb sparing. It's going to be call 911 because that's out of the ability of that specific clinic or outpatient surgery center, or however they have that kind of defined. You have specific policy and procedures and say that says if this occurs, transfer out, initiate call 911, give rescue, etc. It doesn't say commonly compound medications to address a headache and a hangover and I'm tired. So the practice would still have to change.
Can I just ask, I mean, personally, it's all over around where I live. And yes, they definitely think they're being compliant. They bring up an iPad with a doctor or an NP often to speak with you for 2 minutes and then approve it. So I could see why no nurse would think that that was inappropriate what they were doing. But so is the BRN suggesting that you put out a bulletin or an education? And if so, how do you do so without alienating, unfortunately, so many businesses that now do this? Or does that not matter? I'm just curious, how do you manage the politics if that's what you're intending? I'm not clear on what your proposal is, but I imagine when you, yeah.
Yeah, there is no proposal here. This is just information only. This is something that your chair, Samantha, asked me to kind of put on and have a deeper conversation so that you guys are aware as well. We have, which our board did support, our board made a motion to go forward with it. We have a listserv message that we could send out to all 500,000 plus licensees in the state of California. We have social media messaging that could go out on all of our platforms to support that messaging. And we also have language that will be added to our website. There will be a web page in there on that. We also have plans to kind of go in about, ownership and all kinds of stuff too, and update our website to do that, because those are our common kind of complaints that are coming in. We have not chosen to release the messaging, even though it was approved by our board at this point, because of the impact that we know that this will occur. So we want to be prepared with kind of alternatives that are supported within our scope of how this can be done. That if you had a physician or on staff that could do that, then you could administer it. If you had a patient seen in advance, where an order can be given and that could be sent out to a compounding pharmacy, and then they come back the next day or in 2 or 3 hours, then they could receive that, right? Because then a compounding pharmacy that you partner with could compound that and have that patient specific and labeled and ready for them. So it's not that they can't continue to run those businesses, but they would have to run those businesses in confines of the current law, and which would change kind of which would require kind of a restructuring. So we want to be prepared to answer those questions if when that goes out, we're able to send them to like, hey, check in with the pharmacy board here, look at the med board here. These are possibilities that have been proposed that are within scope of practice and within the current laws. We want to give people a path forward on how to continue to do what they're doing, and not just say, you just sunk your life savings into this and now you're done, right?
That seems
that's
really,
not what we
oh,
want
go
to
ahead.
do.
Sorry. I have a comment after you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, so does the BRN have the, the manpower to investigate or at least reach out to these clinics and just kind of ensure that they understand what the rules are and say, hey, we just want to make sure you're in compliance with it. This is the law. And if you're not, there is a pathway, but we're not going to assume that you're doing everything correctly. We're kind of cracking down on some of these, operations that are not following the law. Is there, I mean, I don't even know how many of these clinics exist in California. I'm assuming there's a large number, but have you looked into that as a possible, because I'll be honest, I mean, the whole PSA thing, you know what I mean? People aren't going to hear it. They're not going to listen. I don't think it's going to touch the problem. I think you have to reach out directly to these clinics.
Correct. So in the ability that we have is through the list servers, which is reaching out to all of our licensees, right? We can send an email out to them and they can get that directly in their email box that they have on file with us. Historically, that's not, they see a message from the Board of Registered Nursing. They don't read it. They don't open it. So we can't guarantee that that's done. But it has now reached the organization level, right? CANP is very much aware of it. CANA is very much aware of it. That's our nurse anesthetist. That's our nurse practitioner groups. They're very much aware of it. Nurse midwives are aware of this as well. And so now they're doing an active reach out on their end as well. And that is why CANP actually reached out to the legislators to see about getting that addressed and changed, right? So there is an awareness of it. That messaging is starting, and hopefully word of mouth that will change. We do not have the authority and law to do what you're asking us to do right now, Dr. Ray. So we have asked in our sunset to gain that authority to go out and do these types of inspections similar to the pharmacy board. And we don't know if that will be picked up or not, but currently we don't have the authority to do that. I was on a national meeting with the National Council of State Boards of Nursing probably about 2 years ago now, and they color code by state from light to dark of where these med spa IV hydration clinics are located in, and you'd be happy to know that California is the only state that is actually black. So we are more than light to dark. We are the highest concentration of med spa IV hydration clinics in the nation, and they are here located in California.
Not surprised. Can I just one last thought? Carrier pigeons is what I'm going to threaten to use with my doctors who can't read emails, because it's really hard to get anyone to pay attention. I'm sending out carrier pigeons. But other idea, I don't know if you're allowed to do this or what the precedent is. All of my doctors are part of CMA. I don't know if you're allowed to work with the medical board or CMA on this partnership announcement. But I do notice that they tend to listen to scary announcements that could impact their license. Often we get their attention. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, and we are part of a med spa IV hydration task force that is under the Department of Consumer Affairs. It does include the med board. It includes the osteopathic board, the PA board, our board, the LVN board. It also includes other boards that you probably would not expect, which is like barbering and cosmetology, because a lot of compounding, believe it or not, occur in barbering and cosmetology areas. Chiropractic board is on there, naturopathic board is on there. So this is not a RN, APRN issue exclusively. It does cross many boards and bureaus that are under the purview of the Department of Consumer Affairs. And we have an active partnership with all of them to work together to get messaging out, to try to make people understand what is required and what is within scope and what's not. So we're all working towards that same goal, and we all want the messaging to go out to everybody. So it unfortunately does affect our licensees probably at a greater number than the other ones, because even in barbering and cosmetology, it's the RN or the APRN in the barbering and cosmetology location that is doing it. So it does have a greater impact to our BRN board than it does the other ones that we are affiliated with.
Lori, aside from like emails and messages, what about like at the time that someone recertify or relicenses, when they renew their license, having something that comes up, because usually when I just redid my medical license, you have to click through some things and say yes or no to some questions. Is it possible to have a link that requires that they watch like a 5-minute video or something that says, this is a educational component that is now required? Would BRN have to sign off on that, or is that something you think might be more effective? Because then they're forced to do it. They can't get their license unless they get through this mandatory module.
If I was able to do that, they'd probably have 3 hours of YouTube videos they would have to watch before they can renew their license. The problem is even our not problem, it depends on who we're talking to, right? The barrier that I run up against is even our application renewal process is all law. And so if we want to add something to our application, it would have to go through a regulatory or a statutory change in order for us to do that. So I don't have the ability to do that currently, but that might be something that comes forward in our sunset where it says, we're seeing this as such an increase that on renewal of your RN license, because each one of our APRNs does have to renew an RN license, but on a renewal of their RN license, they must attest to this and watch a 30-second video on what compounding is and to ensure that that's not being done. I mean, that could come forward in our sunset. I don't know what it's going to look like, but if that came forward in law, then we would be able to update our license renewal and initial application to reflect what is required in law.
This is Reza. Real quick, I just wanted to add a thought to that.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting idea, the idea of adding a requirement, and Lori had a funny way of responding to that, but a requirement for licensure would have to be, I think, incorporated into reg. On the other hand, I could envision something like, you know, an optional link that folks could click on, that if it
Yeah.
happens to pertain to them and it gets their attention, they can click on it and it takes them to someplace with further information.
There you go.
Just kind of taking advantage of the fact that you've got their eyeballs there. But you'd have to kind of be careful about just how much of that kind of stuff you cram into the application process. But just, I thought definitely
Well,
not a requirement.
I mean,
but,
I don't know what other options you have. Otherwise, your hands are kind of tied here. You know, you can just keep sending emails know that people are going to
yeah,
ignore.
I mean, and the other issue, just to kind of address Reza, where it kind of draws my attention to, is HCI has a optional non-required workforce survey that is tied to our renewal. And it, even though it's optional and non-required, it had to be set forth in regulations for us to add it to the application renewal process. So I'm not 100% sure how much leeway we would even be able to have to even add an optional click on this link potentially in there. So definitely something I could research, and I could work with Reza to look at that. But I know that we had to do a lot of hoops to jump through to get the workforce HCI survey that is not optional, that is optional to be added to our application renewal process too. So I don't know that it's very as straightforward and easy as it seems to be in upfront. But again, if I could put a lot of things in there and what I think they need to watch and listen to, it would be a lot, because definitely what we run across the most here is that people don't realize that they're acting out of scope. And I don't believe that it's malicious. I think it's just kind of some essential naivety that they obviously are not aware of.
Can it be put on the BRN website, just as, you know, a short informational or educational thing? Is that
Yes.
allowed?
Yeah, it is. And so if you were to go to our last board meeting materials, there is a compounding section in our board meeting materials that has the website update. It has what we would put on our website. It has what we would put out to social media. It has what we would send out to our licensees. It's in our board materials, and our board did vote to move forward with that. We are looking at a good time to do that. Probably not during spring break and probably not during summer break, just because people are off work and not in their normal routines and less likely to read it. So I believe that we'll probably be aiming for release of that towards the fall. Probably August-ish is what I'm thinking we would probably release that. So that would give us some times to kind of meet with all of our advisory committees as well, make sure they're fully aware of it and have those conversations so that they can then back us up when we move out there. And just, you know, to kind of put it out there, California Nursing Association already started messaging back on this in 2023. I have a flyer that was shared with me from Sutter Health that says "Know Your Rights," and it's CNA and the national union as well, and Sutter Health. They partnered together and started actively putting out the messaging on compounding. So they partnered with the unions as well as their organization to do this back in 2023. So organizations are aware of this. They are actively doing this. And I think that's really what we're going to have to do, is just rely on partnership to make sure that that messaging gets out and is supported and carried through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the sunset legislation happen before August, so you wouldn't have to make changes
not.
to these announcements?
No, we'll know what the language is starting to look like by then. And if there was language in there that directly addressed compounding, we would choose not to release a statement. And we would wait for that. We'll have a pretty good idea come August what the final language is going to look like. So definitely, again, in strategy, would look at that before we caused chaos if it was going to be something that was removed.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'm going.
Yeah, motion is needed if you don't want to. It does say discussion and possible action if there was something that you guys wanted to do.
Yeah.
But you could treat this as information only, and you could go out to public comment.
Okay. Is there any action that that any of the committee members wants to take as it relates to this? Hearing all the information that we've heard from EO Melby at this point in time? Okay, hearing none, I am going to hand it over to the moderator for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing in the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." It looks like Cynthia Sanchez at at 2:00. Whoops. So about 1:57 tried to speak. So 1 second here. Let's see if Cynthia still wants to speak. Not sure if it's regarding this or something previous. I guess we'll find out.
Can I talk?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I tried. It wouldn't let me put the question in, and so my typing got all crazy. The original comment that I had was about the 103 transition to practice. I have been an RN since 1986 and a nurse practitioner since 1999. And I applied for the 103, and I'm not I'm working without the standardized procedure in my clinic because my medical director is very supportive. But I do know of other nurse practitioners who work in settings where their medical group decided that they do not want to acknowledge the fact that they are 103. To be perfectly honest, that has not changed my practice at all. I am still doing the same. I have not done anything different. I still see patients. I still prescribe the same things and order the same tests and see them the same way that I was seeing them before. Nothing has changed. And I still consult with my medical director if I have somebody that is out of my scope or that I have a question about. So for those nurse practitioners that are working in a setting that refuses to acknowledge the fact that they are 103, and I actually have heard of some places that have discouraged their nurse practitioners from applying for a 103, told them not to, told them if they did that they had to inform them first. So why does there have to be something that says that they're actually working as a 103? My practice hasn't changed one bit.
I can address that just quickly because, of course, it is obviously an error that occurred on our end where we missed that. It's the administrative part behind your practice that is different. It's not your practice that is different. It's how that is set forth. If you had a chance to look at the specific requirements within the standardized procedures, it is extensive into what is required in a standardized procedure that is not required when a person is working with the collaborative agreement within policies and procedures that are specific to the 103. And so with what it is supposed to be done administratively is that that standardized procedure is truly specifies which function you can do and under what circumstances. It is very finite, it's very detailed. It states the requirements on which you are to follow regarding performing those specific functions. It also requires them to specify any experience, training, or education that is required, establishing a method for how they would do initial and continuing evaluation of those competencies that are then required to do that function. There's record keeping that is required of the standardized procedure and how people are held to it. There is, again, a part of the standardized procedure that talks about what procedures require immediate supervision of a physician. They set forth any special circumstances on which the RN is to immediately communicate out. They set limits on the setting. They specify patient record keeping requirements, and then they establish a method for periodic review. And although your clinic may do that, that is not the standard across the state. And so we have to regulate to the state and not to an individual person's work environment. And so your work environment may be very good at mirroring their policies and procedures to the prior standardized procedure process, and you could have some of the same requirements on the back end that you do on the front end, but that is not a statewide requirement. And so we have to regulate to the state instead of the individual person or the individual work environment. And so there is a requirement to work in a setting that is specific to the 103 that is outlined in law, and that requirement also is to work without the standardized procedures that delineate that, and they transition to a way to allow for that same practice to continue, but with less kind of guardrails in place.
But I thought the intent of the law was to make sure that nurse practitioners had the clinical experience to be able to practice safely. And so if by having that 3-year requirement of practice, that was the point of having a 103, was making sure that you're doing that safely. So whether you're doing that safely in a place that refuses to recognize the fact that you qualify for a 103, or you're working safely in a place that accepts the fact that you're a 103, that shouldn't make any difference. If you're still practicing and you're safe in your practice and you are a competent nurse practitioner, why should you get penalized because your workplace refuses to acknowledge the fact that you're a 103? That would mean that all those people that are 103 have to go out and find a job someplace else that does recognize 103 status. And there are just some companies that are not recognizing it.
Yeah, that's accurate. And the way that the law is written today, that's exactly what has to occur. If you want to work as a 103 and you want to be recognized as a 103, you would have to go to an employer that recognizes it. We don't have any jurisdiction over employers. And so that is the way it stands right now. You are correct on the intention of the law. There are many people involved in that and what they think leads to that. And the general discussion that was shared with us is that you have to work as a 103 in that group setting in order to get that experience in clinical training to ensure that the competence is there for when you become an independent practitioner. So it is a stepped-in approach currently in California to go from standardized procedure to one that doesn't have standardized procedure that works within specified group settings to then one that would be able to work independently within the defined scope of their clinical education, training, and national certification. And that is currently the only pathway to that type of independent practice in California. If the law changes, then we will address and adjust at that point. But you are right about the limitations, and that is the process that would have to be followed currently in today's law.
So then it would have to be an actual change in the law to change that.
Correct. Correct.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that information. I did actually have one other comment about the compounding.
This one. Yes, go for
Yes,
it.
this particular. Yeah, I might as well because I'm on.
Yeah.
So as I said, I've been an RN since 1986. Worked in a major teaching facility that had tons of people in it. We did, and RNs still do, put more than one medication in a syringe. I am hoping that the BRN would take up this cause, because now you, as an advocate for our patients, you're saying now instead of giving a patient one injection, that we should give them 3, because we don't know how to mix a medication, which we are actually trained to how to mix a medication for immediate use. I'm not talking about we're going to use it later. We mix it, we use it right then and there. And so if you're talking about there's a lot of attention paid to the med spas, but this is happening in hospitals every day, because all the inpatients, this is not life or limb saving medication that we're giving. This is something for their comfort or for their treatment. It's not life or death, but it's still, it's just ridiculous to think that now we have to, or we're going to ask a physician every time we want to put multivitamins in an IV solution that didn't come down mixed. We got to wait for the pharmacy. And that was the problem. It was a major teaching hospital. And so there wasn't always, pharmacy didn't always send stuff down that fast. And if you wanted it right away, you had to mix it yourself. And for immediate use. So you're talking about changing the way actual nurses in the hospital take care of their patients. That is going to require either the physicians are coming down and mixing it for you, and also hanging the IV bag, because they have to administer it as well, or you have to get it from pharmacy. Like you're talking about impeding patient care.
I hear you, and I understand that 100%. It's not a BRN law, and it's not a change to our law. This is something that has been in the law, unfortunately has not been taught or communicated out appropriately for people to understand that. So just like when I think Jacob was probably the one that came through probably 10, 15 years ago that says you can't do these, and they made the IV bags with the antibiotics and such attached to it, and instead of drawing up and injecting in, you now just pop it together, shake it, and squeeze it out, and you now administer it. Something needs to change. Again, it's not the BRN specific law that can do that. It has to come from pharmacy as well. It also has to go through the federal law, which is the USP 797, et cetera. And so it is multi-level. The reason that we become involved is not by choice necessarily. It's that we saw an increase in complaints. We saw an increase in issues that were coming forward, letting us know that as these things were being looked at, that people may not be aware of it. And so we decided to proactively educate on that. So it is not a change, unfortunately. It's that it's a practice that had continued from previous law and previous education. And I mean, I used to do that same thing too when I was on the floor, 20 years ago. And yes, I truly believe that RNs have that ability to do it. We were taught how to do it. It's just not currently supported in this state's scope of practice through various levels, and laws would have to change to address that. So you're accurate that it would affect direct patient care. You're accurate that it does not just limit in a med spa IV hydration setting, that it does actually affect hospital settings as well. And you're accurate in your description of how it doesn't seem to lend itself easily to a solution with a pharmacy or a physician jumping in and doing it. So those are all issues that need to be raised and addressed in a legislative fashion. And hopefully having these kind of discussions and getting that out there can warrant itself to those kind of further discussions.
Well, I would ask, and I would hope that the BRN would be supportive of any legislation that would come, and hopefully also the California Medical Association, because this really does impact patient care, and we should all come together to have laws that reflect practice and best practices for patients, and also being cost effective, because obviously we can't have pharmacists coming down or they're just not sitting there waiting to admix our IV solutions every time we need them.
That is accurate. If a bill were to come forward, it would go in front of our board, and I don't see a reason why our board would oppose it. But of course, it is up to our 9-member board to make that decision on whether they would support or not. One thing, just to be very clear, that some people are not aware of with the California Board of Registered Nursing and what our kind of direction is from the legislators is the reason that we are here is for public protection. And that means my role is specifically protecting the patient from the nurse. I know that sounds really kind of terrible, especially with me being a nurse. It's kind of was a hard kind of brain flip. But the reason I bring that up is when you look at the role of me in this position as an organization is our role at the Board of Registered Nursing is not to ask for an expanded scope or an altered scope of practice. That comes from organizations, that comes from California Hospital Association, that comes from California Medical Association, that comes from the California Association of Nurse Practitioners. That is actually something that we are not allowed to really kind of move forward. And so if there is ever a process that needs to be updated that is expanding of a scope of practice, that is something that has to happen outside of BRN, and it goes to an organization that brings that forward. And then we would take a position, our 9-member board would take a position of oppose or support or whatever on that. So it's not that I don't want to do that or I don't feel that we should do that. It's that we have a very specific role and that is not within our purview to be able to ask for scope of practice changes that makes it more expansive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Jeffrey would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Yes, hi. My question is a similar one to one that I posed a month ago at the Burn, one of the other meetings at the Burn. I asked about the 104 NP application. I was basically asking if there was an update on when we could access that application, short of the 3 years after having become 103 NP. Because I understand that there are 2 eligibility pathways for 104 NP status. That is 3 years as a 103 NP, including what we talked about earlier, as well as achieving 4,600 hours in direct patient care as a 103 NP. At that meeting, Loretta, you did ask me to write you an email, and I wrote you 2 emails, but I didn't hear back. So I wanted to pose that question to you again. Thank you.
Yeah, so I did receive your emails, and then I directed those emails off so that we could get some action on that. And so again, to get into the weeds a bit, we have to do what's called a Breeze update. Breeze is the system that we use for our applications, and that Breeze update, even though we've asked for it to be occurred, goes into a pool and it gets prioritized through, and we are in there with all other boards and bureaus that are under Department of Consumer Affairs, and there's a release that happens and that we get prioritized into. And so even though we received your email and we have prioritized it and we have asked for this to happen, it is a technological update and we have to wait for that to occur. We have no ETA on when that will occur, but it is, the process is in place to do that. So I apologize that there's not a great update for you, but that is something that we did receive your email. We did ask for those changes to be addressed, and we're hoping that that will get prioritized in and released as quickly as possible. But it's not an easy process to get all that through and then get that in a timely fashion.
Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Cynthia Yovanov would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this meeting. It was informative. I do have two inquiries. I know the comment about the 103 and 104, and once you become a 104, that you have to practice within your population foci. The comment that was stated, though, was that it truly becomes a limited practice because of your board certification. The problem of the comment, and I just want clarification, is that our board certification will never, ever, ever, ever be based on setting, and that is the consensus model. It is based on population. So I'm trying to understand why the messaging for those that are acute care and adult, their population is so broad that they will never be eligible to practice as a 104 in a setting just based on the statement that was mentioned. That's one concern I have. The second is in regards to the statement that organizations, institutions do not have to implement 103 at 104. And so I'm trying to understand why that messaging would go out when that's in law. So I'm trying to understand why the BRN as a whole, and I know Loretta, you're very well read in regards to all of this, but why would that messaging come out essentially saying organizations do not have to do that when that is the law? So I'm trying to understand those two comments.
So the organizations, that's employment law. That is not ours. We can set a scope of practice, and an organization can limit that scope of practice. That is not something that we have any jurisdiction over. A less controversial example would be is we could say that a nurse midwife can deliver a baby, but then that nurse midwife decides to work in an organization that does not provide prenatal care or delivery ability. You can't make that organization say, now allow me to deliver babies in this organization, especially if it's like an outpatient surgery center or something to that effect, right? So we set the scope of practice. We don't set employer responsibility. We don't set facility responsibility. We just say that as a licensee in our state, you have the ability to do this. And it is up to the healthcare setting to define what that ability looks like within their specific healthcare setting. We have no jurisdiction of that. So we can say that the option is here. We can say that it's available. We can say that this person can do it. But if the employer chooses not to do that, then they choose not to do that. And that is within their law to be able to do that. So that is something that we have to understand, is that it's allowable, it's not mandatory. To the second question, I'm trying to remember what that specifically was. And sorry, Cynthia, I'm not trying to
No.
blank on
It was a lot. No, it was just the comment of, like, say 104, right? We've read this thing in and
great.
out.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
So
and just the population or the setting.
It
The
is.
problem is the acute cares will never, just based on what you said. So I'm asking for clarification. Just based
Yeah.
on what you said, you're saying essentially an acute care NP, an adult gero, can never, ever, ever be essentially a 104 because of the setting. A psych we know can stay in psych, an FNP we know can stay in primary, a women's health, etc. But we find ourselves in these retired legacy certifications that they are eligible 103, 104 pathway. But essentially, based on what you said, you're saying that they can't because now it's more finite. So I'm asking for clarification because
Yeah.
that
So
sounds like.
we are not limiting. If you are able to practice as a 104 in alignment with your national certification, you're able to do that. What becomes kind of limiting in nature is the way that the standardized procedure NP is utilized and the way that the 103 NP is utilized. And so the example I gave, and I'll try to reiterate that, is I was a practice manager in my past, and I had a pediatric nurse practitioner that was educated as a pediatric nurse practitioner that had a national certification as a pediatric nurse practitioner. She worked in my organization as a liver and GI specialist in adults. She was competent to do that and had the ability to do that because it was under standardized procedures. And with the update to SB 1451, it's not limited by your national certification or your education and training now to go into the 103. And so based on your competence, you could continue to work as a 103 in that same setting where she could be a pediatric nurse practitioner and choose to work within adult liver and GI. We would have no exclusion to that because it is competency based. It is not tied to your national certification. And so if the physician chose to have them in their practice and utilize a pediatric nurse practitioner as an adult liver and GI nurse practitioner, they could. They cannot do that as a 104 NP. And so we have many, many, many nurse practitioners that work under standardized procedures in areas outside of their education, training, and national certification. We have the entire update to SB 1451, which specifically asked for that removal, where we had limited it in regulation that as a 103, you worked within the area of your national certification and training and experience. And we had that was removed legislatively. And so the 103 was broadened to be in alignment with the standardized procedure NP. In the subsection that addresses the 104 NP, that was not addressed. And the 104 NP is still in alignment with their education, training, and national certification. It's not an or, it's an and it has to be in alignment with all three. So unless that law is updated, that is where it currently lives. That was not something that we narrowed by regulation. That was something that was put into statute. And so that is where that lives. So if you could imagine something as an adult Jerry legacy certification holder in acute care that they could work as a 103 and ultimately work as a 104, and you had an employer that was able to do that and address that as the population focus, because that's where we license that as the population focus, then that would be something that would be supported. If that is not something that is being able to be managed, imagined, or put into place for it, then you're correct, that would occur. But that again is outside of the BRN's jurisdiction again, because what we allow for, we cannot make mandatory because we don't have that type of authority.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the details. I think it's just getting, I think it's getting a little convoluted because by default of the bill, the 103 status removes the standardized procedure. The standardized procedure does not declare competency. The institution and our board certification does. And so I was just trying to make sure, because, there's a lot of public conversation too, but I just wanted to make sure, like, what is really the BRN interpreting? Because standardized procedures removes that relationship, right? It removes the 103, removes that standardized procedure. So by default, competency is based on the institution, whether that's through medical staff, et cetera, secondary certification. So I feel like there's just a lot of misinformation floating around. So I just wanted to address it here so that we can get something that truly validate what that 103 is and truly validates that 104. Because even as a 104, if a 104 community NP chooses to go to a community hospital and they accept them or recognize them via medical staff, then competency is declared through medical staff, and that's usually like FPP, OPP. But I just wanted clarification because of the earlier comment of, like, say the 104 who's an acute care, but they're based on setting, but nurse practitioners will never be setting specified. So that's why I asked the question, and I appreciate your clarification.
Correct. The only setting specified for a nurse practitioner today is as a 103. The 103 in law has specific settings that they are able to practice within. And it says they're able to, not mandated to, but they're able to practice those. So if the setting says no, then it doesn't happen. But they are able to practice as a 103 in specified settings. And that was outlined in AB 890 and did not change. What was also outlined in AB 890 that did not change was the section in 104 that it is 2837.104, and that is lowercase c1. And it says a nurse practitioner authorized to practice pursuant to this section shall comply with all of the following. The nurse practitioner, consistent with applicable standards of care, shall not practice beyond the scope of their clinical and professional education and training, including specific areas of concentration, and shall only practice within the limits of their knowledge and experience and national certification. And that was put forth in AB 890, was not altered or changed in SB 1451, and remains the requirement today. And so the 104 is limited, and it is limited to the area that they shall only practice within the limits of their knowledge and experience and national certification. That national certification is at a population focus. So the example that I use again is extreme, going from a pediatric nurse practitioner to wanting to practice as an adult liver and GI specialist. That is not something that is covered, but there are going to be instances of, like, your family nurse practitioner, your acute care adult Jerry, those where it will be much more expansive because that is what their national certification is. It is much more expansive and less narrowed than a pediatric NP or a neonatal NP, but you would not be able to have a neonatal NP working as a women's health nurse practitioner. You would not be able to have a women's health nurse practitioner working as a pediatric nurse practitioner, etc., in those very fine, very narrowed national certifications. So there is going to be some probably both subjectivity and objectivity when it comes down to interpreting what the family nurse practitioner is, or what your adult Jerry acute care or nurse practitioner is able to do at the population focus. And again, that would rely on the employer essentially to be able to define that, and we would have to if there was a complaint or something come through, we'd have to look at all of that evidence there. But there are some good examples we can use where it narrows, but then you do bring good points when you're saying, well, where does this land? And the law says within their knowledge and experience and national certification, it all has to line up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think the key word that you said that I really need people, and those are to our physician colleagues who are probably on this call, that, a lot of institutions are changing their bylaws, but when people look at setting, they're interchangeable. When you talk settings or the statute is settings, you're looking at the 6 that are in the bill. But when our physician colleagues talk about setting, there's always the conversation of, oh, well, setting of ortho, oh, setting of trauma, oh, setting of critical care. So that word setting can be quite confusing, but you pointing out the word concentration by definition, I think is more palliable. And in regards to, a lot of the changes to bylaws that a lot of institutions in California have waited for, is because a lot of the institutions follow the California Medical Association's bylaws. And so all these institutions are waiting for CMA's templated bylaws because everybody's struggling on the implementation side. So I do appreciate you solidifying the word concentration versus setting, which is essentially based on what the bill says, not setting on specialty. So I appreciate the feedback.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Moderator.
your comment. Sorry, I was
Moderator.
just saying. Can you hear me? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to take an opportunity to remember our public comments that we are now on agenda item 7.0, which is speaking specifically to compounding. And so any comments that we have moving forward need to be geared towards that specific agenda item as we had moved on previously. And so are there any other additional comments that need to be made specifically towards our independent compounding medications subject?
There are no other requests for comment.
Thank you. I guess the only additional thing that I need to, can we close the comment section, please?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. For our committee members, is there any action items that we wanted to take forth as it relates to this agenda item, hearing the one public comment that we heard regarding this subject matter? I am of thought process that since we have the sunset bill and we have August coming up, that perhaps we wait to see what happens then. And if anybody else disagrees with me, please feel free to interject. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to our next agenda item. Agenda item 8.0, we are going to be discussing legislation impacting nurse practitioners, specifically AB 1973, and possible action to make recommendations to the Nursing Practice Committee and the board regarding this legislation. I think this information was going to be presented by Marissa Clark, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, E.O. Melby, is that correct?
I'm not sure that it was. She is here and in attendance. So
Okay.
if she felt comfortable, she could. But
I didn't know who was presenting it.
no, that's totally okay. I'm looking at the screen to see if I have a nod or not, if she's willing or wanting to, and she does not have to.
I'm happy to if you would like me to.
If you want to, I would love that. Yes, because if
Yeah.
not, I can go ahead.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I had to get unmuted. Good afternoon, everyone. Marissa Clark. I'm the Chief of Legislative Affairs. And so this agenda item, what we've added recently to a lot of the advisory committees are bills that kind of impact that area or certification to allow the committees to kind of discuss and weigh in if there's any input or kind of comments that you would like us to bring to the legislative subcommittee and ultimately the full board when they decide whether or not to take a position. And so one of the main bills that was impacting nurse practitioners that we have been tracking is AB 1973, and that is related to abortion services. And so I'll give you just kind of a brief overview of the bill and then happy to kind of answer questions or have a dialogue around it. So Assembly Bill 1973 by Assemblymember Aguiar Curry, the overarching purpose is essentially to increase access to abortion services by trying to expand the provider pool for certain procedures. So currently under California law, a pregnant person has the legal right to choose to have an abortion before viability, and a pregnancy becomes viable when a doctor determines that the fetus could live outside the uterus without extreme medical measures, as you all know. So the law also allows for an abortion at any point if needed to protect the life or health of the pregnant person. So currently our law allows for nurse practitioners, certified nurse midwives, and physician assistants to perform first trimester aspiration abortions after they complete specified competency-based clinical and didactic training. What this bill would do is it would delete the reference to abortion by aspiration and instead authorize nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, and physician assistants to perform procedural abortions after also completing specified clinical and didactic training. And so the term procedural abortion is a more kind of open and inclusive term that includes more than just aspiration abortions. It also includes certain methods that may typically be used during the second trimester, such as a dilation and evacuation or a D&E. And so the bill also would require a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife that is performing a procedural abortion to establish and maintain procedures for consultation, collaboration, referral, and transfer of care to a physician and surgeon in complex cases and cases with complications, conditions, or emergencies requiring care that is beyond the scope of their education, training, and experience. So that provision just kind of clarifies that similar to the existing scope of practice and rules, if anything were to come up during the procedure that was a little bit more urgent or emergent and outside the practitioner scope, they would need to have a plan in place to do that referral to a practitioner who could provide the necessary care. One thing for just additional consideration when we were reviewing the bill is that historically in California, RNs and APRNs have not been authorized to perform surgery according to our Business and Professions Code. So this would potentially make a little bit of a change since some of the procedural abortions do have a surgical component. Other states similar to us also authorize abortion by aspiration within the first trimester. But to my knowledge, there is no other state that currently specifies the ability for advanced practice clinicians to perform them past the first trimester or call out the specific kind of procedures or procedural abortion techniques that this bill does. So it would be something fairly new. But that's just an overarching summary. Happy to answer questions or just allow for conversation.
Can I ask who's sponsoring this bill? Like where did this bill come from? This sounds like this did not come from the medical community.
I can pull it up. It is a group of co-sponsors that there's several organizations. So I want to make sure I have them all. It is co-sponsored by the Black Women for Wellness Action Project, the California Nurse Midwives Association, the Essential Access Health, Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California, Reproductive Freedom for All California, and TEACH, which let me make sure I see what that stands for. I believe it's a organization related to access to abortion care, but I will confirm that. It just says TEACH on the committee analysis.
I mean, just off the top of my head, I mean, I'm all for expanding, access to these critical services. I guess my concerns are, since we're under the DCA and our role is in, kind of protecting patients and things like that, I would absolutely make sure that, we're not like decreasing standards of care and that surgical procedures really should be performed by people who perform surgery and that's their job and not just have people take weekend classes and learn how to do that. That's, and I know that's not exactly what they're saying, but saying that they take didactics sounds like a lot less like medical training and more like learning how to do a procedure, because perforations and complications can occur anytime you're operating, especially late, second trimester on a patient like that. I'd have a lot of concerns, even about a doctor performing those operations if they didn't have proper training. So surgery, I think, you're getting into a gray zone there. And my personal feeling is that we should not recommend that this be supported by the board.
And just to clarify, it does say that the training has to include both clinical and a didactic component. So it does speak a little bit to both, but didactic is in there.
Yeah, I understand. But I mean, it's just not a part of a person's, nursing training. It's not part of their nurse practitioner training. Having them perform procedures is outside their scope of practice in my interpretation of the law as it exists now anyway.
I have a question. The nurse not the nurse practitioner, the midwife for sure has to have had that training, right? And this has nothing to do with whether the 103, 104, this has to do with that whole group. I mean, it can include the 103, 104 at some point, but who is the people, like the doctor says, are included in there. I can see the nurse midwives, say it's a pediatric nurse, and she learns how to do the procedure. Would she be, is there anything that keeps her away from doing that in this one?
So what this bill would do is there's an existing code section that speaks to authorizing the ability for nurse practitioners, certified nurse midwives, and physician assistants to perform abortion by aspiration. And in order to be eligible to do that, they have to complete a training that is one of the trainings that is listed out in law. And so I can go through those specific ones. So if an example is a board approved nurse midwifery or nurse practitioner program offered by an accredited or course offered by an accredited program, a continuing education provider that reflects evidence-based curriculum, a course offered by a state or national healthcare professional. So there's all these kind of examples of these are the types of courses or trainings that could be taken. And so that's an existing code. So what this law would do is it would say, in addition to being able to the abortion by aspiration, they could also potentially perform some of these other abortion methods in as well as the abortion by aspiration. So some of the ones that are more commonly done in the second trimester. But they would have to be taking one of those trainings, and it does say it's limited to their existing scope of practice.
So for a physician,
Go ahead.
with that, what kind of training would they have? Their medicine is usually pretty broad. Where would they get necessarily the training for doing GYN procedures?
So I think for some, and Lori, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or others on the committee, I think for some of these, it may be newer trainings that aren't quite established out there because, like I said, some of these procedures, to my knowledge, have not been offered by advanced practice clinicians yet. So these would be trainings potentially that would have to be developed. They could already be out there that they would need to take. I'm not sure the existing kind of availability, to be honest. That's not something we have a catalog of currently, but it does say that in order to be allowed to do it, they would need to take a training that falls under one of the criteria. In terms of the availability of that existing training, I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
If I may,
go for it.
Can I? So funny enough, drawing on my past experience, I was at Planned Parenthood for over a decade as their COO. I feel very strongly that the physicians of Planned Parenthood are of the utmost quality and integrity and would never endorse such a thing if there wasn't an enormous amount of training. In my experience, they're extremely risk averse because of how difficult it is to have bad press as Planned Parenthood. So I would really trust that these physicians have endorsed this not lightly and with a heavy training program in place. So having said that, I definitely support this. And also, just as we all know, there is just horrific access problems for these services now, only getting worse because of the difficulty of the current environment in our country. And so I definitely am in support and believe that it will be done in the highest quality manner, knowing these people the way I do. I agree with that because I do, I'm not I don't work in women's health, but I certainly do know nurse practitioners that have worked and have done these procedures, and I feel it's definitely an access issues, and those that will be going forward to do more complex procedures than just the initial, the first trimester. I think they will definitely be well trained, both didactically and clinically.
Just to follow up on my earlier thoughts, it's not that I doubt that they can do these procedures. I'm not concerned about that. I think anyone can be trained. It's dealing with potential complications. If there's a perforation of the uterus and it becomes, a surgical emergency, that's very different than like a first trimester, form of abortion, which can be done very safely using other techniques. So my concern is that if they're in a non-surgical environment or a non-environment where there's no physician who's trained to do those surgeries, they're going to have a patient who's going to have to go by ambulance to a hospital, and deal with those problems because you don't have somebody on site who can manage that complication. That's my worry.
This is what happens when a physician has a perf and an ASC. The ambulance comes.
Well, I understand, but that's part of their training is to deal with it. And if the patient is hemorrhaging, they have the training. If they had to in an emergency, they could deal with it right there and then. Obviously, the preference is to get them to an operating room, but it's, you know, it's my concern is for the consumer here. That's our job. It's not, you know what I mean? It's the safety of the patient. I'm very sympathetic to the idea of expanding access, and I think we should try to push for that. But I don't think we should decrease the level of training required to do those procedures, especially if it's late, you know, pregnancy, late second trimester, when the complication rates can become much more serious.
So this isn't typically, I think this is the first time we brought a bill to you guys ahead of the board taking any position. So what you guys could do is we could leave it as a discussion here, and Marissa could take the feedback and summarize it and present it as is, that said, you know, advisory committee members had a mixed opinion, and some had this kind of a thought, and others had this kind of a thought, and we could leave it as a general statement that we would then share with our board for them to take that into consideration as part of the bill analysis that she provides to them. What could also be done is a more formal position. And so if you guys chose to, you could take a position that said, I recommend that the board take a position of support, or I recommend the board take a position of oppose, or I recommend the board watch this bill, or recommend a board only support if amended or oppose unless amended, and then set some specific guidelines out to that. That would be a more formal process, and you guys are able to do that. You guys would make a motion, get a second, it would go out to public comment, and then you would do a roll call vote. And during that roll call vote, you would be able to say, Sam, aye, Dr. Espinosa, aye, Dr. Ray, aye, and you could say, Ken, no, or, you know, whatever, and we would reflect who voted and how, and that information would be presented to our board as well. And so we could make this as informal as you guys would like it, where we would just share some of the summary of the discussion, or we can make it as formal as you would want, and we could make a formal position, get a second, go out to public comment, and do a vote so that our board would have a specific accounting of that. Completely up to you guys, as this is the first time that you guys are hearing about it and doing this process, but we leave it up to you and how you guys want to do that. So back to you, Sam.
I have my own opinion about this bill. I would be in support of it at this point in time. I do a lot of procedures myself in my current practice in life-saving techniques. So I think that the capability is there, and I too also understand the importance of having access to care. So I'm asking committee members, how would you like to move forward? If someone would like to make a call for a vote, I would be willing to entertain that at this point in time.
I would like to make a call for a vote for us to endorse this.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay. I'm calling for the vote. We'll do this individually. Myself, yay. Dr. Edward Ray.
No, I do not recommend endorsing this bill.
Okay. Dr. Andrea Espinoza.
I recommend endorsing it with except looking at physician assistants training. So I support the nurse practitioners.
Okay. NP Jan Johnson Griffin.
I'm going to say no.
NP Kevin Maxwell.
I vote in support.
NP Sally Pham made the second, and our first was from Betha Schnell, and so we have majority moving forward to endorse this bill. So that will be our position moving forward. And now I would like to open up to public comment.
And then as we're opening up the public comment, real quick, we can take the feedback, Dr. Ray, that you provided, et cetera, and summarize that as well. So the board can get that entire feedback. We can also send them a section of this committee that is recorded for them to have to watch and listen to the discussion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, in a multi-practitioner environment, having somebody perform these procedures is different than having them by themselves without other practitioners to support them. So I just want to be clear, I'm not endorsing, minimizing access to care. I'm just trying to endorse doing it in a manner that I think supports the patient and, in a safety manner.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment."
This is Reza, Board Counsel. While we're paused here, I just wanted to mention, I think it would have been more appropriate to take public comment before the vote on the motion. That was mostly my fault for not jumping in on that. So we'll go to public comment, and if the comments change the way anybody feels about their vote on the motion, then we'll circle back for sure. Thank you.
Absolutely, Reza. Thank you for I actually thought about that after I did it. My blood sugar may be a little low at this point, so please accept my
That's okay.
apology.
No, that's okay. We're all on the same team, trying to catch those things.
You're doing great. Nobody else
Thank
could
you.
do the job. Mhm.
Committee Chair Gamble Farr, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in BRNHQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. And thank you, EO Milby, for making sure that we address those who had some concerns that are completely valid, I think, as well. So just want to make sure. Okay. And so hearing that, we will make that recommendation to the BRN and continue to follow this bill. Right now, as of, if I'm not mistaken, as of April 9th, it was in the Committee on Health. I don't know exactly where the bill is right now. So we'll just we'll just follow the bill unless Ms. Clark, unless you happen to know exactly where the bill is right now.
It's a process to
I
get
think
her unmuted. So give her
Oh,
1
okay.
second to come off mute.
No.
She's in headquarters, so they have to unmute the room, and then she has to unmute herself. So it takes a second.
No problem. I should have asked that to begin with.
Sorry, hi there. Yes, it is in the Appropriations Committee. We just passed the deadline for bills to move out of the Policy Committee, so Appropriations is where they discuss the potential fiscal impact.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9.0. This is for information and discussion only. This is for an update on the implementation of the Business and Professional Code 2837.104. And this is, we kind of touched on this a little while ago, as it relates to the application process and clarification of transition to practice requirements. And that will be presented by EO Melby. Thank you.
Thank you. And so that I kind of, this should be a quick agenda item. I kind of talked about it previously. So when we created the application in Breeze, we created the 103 application at the same time we did the 104 application, and it was set towards the regulations and the requirements that were in place that date. We released them all to production. We hid the 104 until January of 2026. And we thought we were ahead of the game. Everything was going great. And so January 2026 show up and we released the 104. That was completely my fault. When SB 1351 updated the process of becoming a 103 and ultimately becoming a 104, I did not catch that and update the application for the 103 or the 104 on that. And so although we implemented it and put it on our website and did some messaging out, we did not catch that the application was out of date and essentially not accurate. So once January came and we were very excited about it and our phone line started blowing up, we realized that there was a problem. So it was brought to my attention after meeting with CANP, actually. They were very, very great at kind of noticing that and calling a meeting and letting us know. And so we have now looked at the entire process of nurse practitioner applications. So nurse practitioner furnishing, the Schedule 2, as well as the 103 and the 104, et cetera. And we are looking to align all of those applications. We have done a review. It is now with staff. And we will be moving that through the technology part of it to get all of those changes done. We will start with the 104 application and move backwards to the original NP application, so that all of those will then line up and move seamlessly as a person progresses from the initial application for an NP all the way through to the 103 and the 104, et cetera. So that is, I will take the ownership for that as a miss on my end, and we are diligently working towards updating that. Additionally, there is a form that we created for the doctoral of nursing practice hours that can be counted towards the completion of the 103 to be counted towards the 104. And that form is a familiar form that you guys have been using just as a program verification that you guys have been using historically. It has been updated to be turned into the program director of the NP program that you went to for your DNP, who would be able to certify how many of your direct patient care clinical hours are above what was required for your master's degree and initial license as the NP. And depending on what that director of nursing certifies is above, that meets our regulatory requirement, those hours could be removed from the 4,600 hour requirement as already being successfully completed as part of your DNP. So we have those processes, we're working on them, we're bringing them out, but I wanted to make sure that you guys are fully aware of the process and how we ended up in this situation is where I always say with my staff is what had happened was, and that's fully my fault. I missed it completely, and we're working diligently to fix it. So I hope to have a fix within the first half this year. I don't know that will happen, honestly. I think it'll more be by the end of this year. And that is just, again, the way they were set up as a state service and as a state public entity is that we go into a pool, and we go into a pool with all other DCA boards on what they need updated on their applications and within their system. And we wait our turn patiently for it. So in the meantime, if you are able to access the 104 application, you are able to complete the 104 application, but there are some hiccups on it. And if you run into issues with it, you would have to kind of do a direct call out, emailing, the APRN staff and licensing and trying to get that fixed. And they will have to do a very manual process, which takes a lot of time and a lot of staff work to get that done. But it's not that it could not be done. It just will take a lot of time and a lot of patience to get it done until we're able to update the IT system to support it better. So I apologize. That was not our intention. We tried to be very prepared and have it done in advance. And then with the law change, it was missed.
Sally.
So would you recommend then we just wait then for to apply for the 104 and wait for the updates from the computer?
I would love to recommend that. I can't, right? That would be me barring access. And so when I take myself and my staff into consideration, I'm like, please, yes, wait. But that's not something that I can do. So if you are eligible for it, you believe that you're eligible for it, you can access the current application that is out there in public. You can apply through that application. and then follow up with an email to licensing, and we will work with you to get that done, but understanding that there are 3,103 NPs that are wanting to move to a 104 NP. And so you will be one of 3,000 in that email box. That is also an email box to our 500,000 licensee pluses that will have to be kind of triaged and put forth. And so it will not be quick. But it is a process that can be done, and we are working diligently to get that addressed so that you could go online, and then it will be quick because the intent is to have that as a automatic application and approval once the attestations and stuff are received.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to open it up for comment. A moderator, please.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Gambles Farr, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in BRNHQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, moderator, thank you, please. So the time is now 3:58. We have one more agenda item, and it's an information only. I would like to get, it's specifically something that I wanted to bring up in case people did not know. Because it does actually affect NP practice, NP schools in the state of California and out of the state of California. And so it would be an information only. I wanted to get the committee's thoughts if we had another 5 minutes to address this specific agenda item.
I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Cool.
Anybody opposed to it?
I will speak quickly, Sam.
Okay.
And so
Okay,
perfect.
perfect.
I'll start off by speaking even more quickly. Is we already discussed this as part of our board meeting. So if you have to drop off, please go and view our last board meeting. There was some substantial discussion around nurse practitioner out-of-state and in-state programs in the clinical. So it is there if you missed this. And then this will be posted online as well, so you could hear that in the future if you have to drop off. So currently, we have a process in California that approves all nurse practitioner programs throughout the state of California. That is new. It was optional up until 2019. In 2019, regulations were updated. It added 1486, I believe, which then required in-state approval, or sorry, out-of-state and in-state approval. It altered a few things. And we started approving our in-state nurse practitioner programs as well as a requirement. In-state nurse practitioner programs are not required to get enrollment approval requests through us. So if they want to grow, they just let us know that they're growing. This is the track that they're doing, and this is how many students they're going to have. And then they grow. It is completely, it's less of an oversight that we have than what people are used to looking at with pre-licensure nursing programs. Then we bring in the out-of-state programs. We approved our very first out-of-state program in the fall of 2020. And in the fall of 2020, when we approved that out-of-state program, we're not approving that program saying that you're fantastic and we are able to dictate what you do or don't do. We're approving that program to say that they are equivalent to the in-state program, that they match the requirements in 16 CCR 1484, and that because they match that requirement, the students that are RNs in California that are attending the out-of-state nurse practitioners program because that preparation is similar to ours, are able to do clinicals in our state, do nurse practitioner clinicals in our state. So again, because this is a new process as of fall of 2020, there were already nurse practitioner programs in state and out of state doing this. We are just bringing them all into compliance. We don't know what the N is. We don't know how many in state. We didn't know how many in state. We do now. We don't know how many out of state are doing clinicals in our state. So we have been operating on kind of the process of, as we learn about you, we contact you and we bring you in. We hope that they operate on the honor system and they reach out to us for approval. What we discovered is, as this process has been now in place for about 5 years, is that it took a turn that we did not fully anticipate. And what that turn is now there are more out-of-state nurse practitioner students in California doing clinicals than are in-state nurse practitioner students. And that has really kind of drawn a spotlight on us. So this is difficult because we don't want to have any impact to the pipeline of providers. And if we were to make some regulations that would stop that, out-of-state programs and limit their enrollments, we would essentially affect the pipeline, especially that there are more in-state RNs licensed here going to NP schools out of state than there are currently in our state. So there's not an easy answer. We did discuss this immensely in our board meeting, and Sam, this is something that is very near and dear as she's attending one of those out-of-state nursing programs, nurse practitioner programs, and she desperately wants to do clinicals in our state. And so just for, full transparency. And so it is literally affecting the people that we work with day to day, right? And so we don't have a straightforward answer, but our board is looking at this. Our board is trying to decide if there is anything that we can do to kind of even the in-state and out-of-state, but currently we're at a process that says if they meet our requirements, our board can approve it. If they don't meet our requirements, our board can remove approval at any point. Our board is talking about, instead of approving like 500 students, we might approve 100, and limiting that to make it a little more fair, but that doesn't change their overall enrollment numbers out of state. They can still enroll 500. And they can be 500 California RNs going to NP program, but only 100 of them would be able to do clinicals in our state. The other 400 would have to find a clinical practice part outside of California if that's what they chose to do, because again, we have no jurisdiction over those out-of-state programs. We just have jurisdiction of who can do clinicals in our state and how many. So opened up for discussion or any comments around that, but it's kind of a big deal right now in our board's world.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why are people going to do the clinicals out of state? What?
They're wanting to do clinicals in state, but they're attending an out of state school.
Why is that? Why would somebody attend an out of state school and do their clinicals here? I'm just trying to...
that's the thing is access, right? And so in state, our in-state programs, we only have 35 total nursing programs in state. There are 41 nursing programs that are approved already from out of state to do clinicals in state. There are 9 that are pending approval. There are more that contact us daily. So there are more programs available to the RN that wants to become an NP out of state. And so that access is there. more and more are done online, the didactic part and the clinical part, they want to do close to home, and maybe even in institutions that they're currently employed in. So it makes sense. It's just problematic when more out-of-state nurse practitioner programs are having their clinicals done here than our in-state programs, and it affects the enrollment and the ability for our in-state programs to grow because they're impacted by the out-of-state programs. And so that's really where we come in to be going, oh yeah, this did have a negative effect. And that effect is that if our in-state programs wanted to grow or become new, they're having difficulty time finding clinical placements. Additionally, in this process, it was learned that students and or schools are paying for clinical placements, and that is not illegal currently.
I think also, if I may interject to answer Dr. Espinosa's question, for people who maybe have one certification and want to go back to school and get a second certification, particularly like in acute care, there are very limited acute care programs in the state of California. And so if you're a working professional and you want to go back and you're already working as an NP, you can then go online, do the didactic, but you're doing your clinicals in your home state, which would be California. So that was an example for me, particularly. So my school that I was going to had to get approval through the BRN in order for me to do clinicals here. But that also not only affects nurse practitioners, but it's also people who are seeking doctorate of nursing practice degrees who have to do additional time. All those classes fall under that precipice. So it's not just nurses who are looking to become first-time NPs, but it's also people who are returning back for additional education that this is impacting. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that this was something that people knew about, because the institutions have now started really honing in on the fact that, is your school approved through the California BRN? And if they're not, then the people who have been precepting these students are limited and not allowed to precept them. So it does affect the pipeline in a big, major way, as people are learning about this process in real time. So
Yeah, some of the examples of numbers is, in-state neonatal nurse practitioner, they have 5 students. Out-of-state neonatal nurse practitioners, we have 34 students. In-state women's health nurse practitioner, we have 51. Out-of-state, we have 94. Adult Jerry, primary acute. In-state, we have 342 students. Out-of-state, we have 876. Right. So there is a difference between in-state and out-of-state. And again, it's just drawing your guys' attention to this, as this was a more kind of broad discussion at our board level, and no clear kind of pathway to solve this issue right now. But our board's going to continue to look at it. All of this is on our website. You can look at it there's an out-of-state nurse practitioner. You can find all the programs that are currently approved, what tracks, what numbers, what they have to do to get approved is all on our website. It's all public data. And we did, again, share this out at our board meeting. So we're not asking for any kind of action from you guys, but just making you aware. And I know it's 4:10, so we don't want to go out to comment, to allow the public to kind of have some talk on this and just be mindful of time.
absolutely. Dr.
Can I make a
Espinosa?
comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I just, being in academia at our school, we struggle mightily to get clinical placements for all of our students. We've had to eliminate programs because we could not get placements for 5 students. The state of California is not awash in clinical placements that can just be cannibalized by outside programs. So I think we need to support the California schools and do more to encourage people to precept students. But we employ a full-time individual that struggles to get enough placements for students, and we would love to bring more students into our university. But we're limited. That's always a huge problem. And having organizations from outside the state, I know You know, I'm sure they provide a fine education, but I think we need to support what's at home before we go looking outside. As much as I support Samantha continuing her education.
Right. I hear you, Kevin. And that's really what our board is taking a look at, right? Is
Yeah.
what can we do? Our current regulation doesn't give us an ability to say no. And so we would have to do some regulatory updates to address that. But right now, what our board is doing is as they come in, they're evaluating to see if they meet criteria. If they meet criteria, we can approve them. We're trying to go back and grab numbers to see what they've historically done in California and make sure that those numbers are the same instead of having new programs come in right now and just say, we're going to add 500 students to the pipeline and you guys are going to have to absorb it as a preceptor, because that, again, does crumble some of the structures within California already. So that's not something that we want to occur.
If I could just make a quick comment from I'm feeling a little bit guilty right now because I'm one of those places that turned down preceptorship multiple times. You know, for the folks who sponsor these, it is a heavy cost, you know, and with nursing turnover and staff turnover, you're constantly training your new staff. And so training other staff that won't stay with you. And as you said, there's no compensation. It's really tough. So I don't know if there can ever be a type of incentive for the placements, but in my opinion, if you can't get the places where the placements occur some kind of incentive or positive, then it's very tough because they're struggling as it is to train who they have.
Yeah, and we don't have any ability to give incentives. So we think it's going to come down to the facilities on whether or not they accept them or not, knowing just kind of the partnerships that are set up. But we are taking a look at this.
Probably incentives other than monetary if you were creative, just thinking. But anyway.
But not something that our board can do. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Espinosa, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, I just had, the comment was that, so why are we doing, you know how you wanted, we talked about limiting the number from out of state. Why not limited just to residents of California that wouldn't have to go out of state and come back? At least until we get more placement area.
It is residents of California. It is.
Okay.
You have to be licensed as an RN or an NP in California in order to do clinicals here. And so that has to happen. So, you know, that is a requirement. Whether or not their residence is different. You know, you can be licensed as a RN in California and live in Nevada, especially in our border towns, right? So we can't be prescriptive as tying it to their address of record because that can be different. But they are required to be licensed as a resident, licensed as an RN in California in order to be able to do nurse practitioner clinicals in California. That is a requirement.
So there really isn't different in terms of individuals. They're all California residents, and you would have to limit the out of state is what you're saying, but they're the same people trying to get
the same people. Yeah, that's the problem that we're running into. So we don't have an answer. We just want to bring it to you for information so you guys understand what's going on and kind of hear it. But we're not asking for a motion or anything. So if there's further discussion, we're happy to have it. But I do want to be mindful of time. It is 4:15.
Yes.
And so we can go out to public comment if you would like to, Sam.
Yes, let's go to public comment. I do support California. I'm a Californian. I was born here. Okay, moderator.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing in the question box, "I would like to make a comment." I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Gamble-Spar, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in BRNHQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please, moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And our final agenda item, Dr. Espinoza, go right ahead. You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Is it possible to put down on the website and that we need clinical sites? I mean, I love teaching, and I used to do it with UCLA for the family nurse practitioner. Is that the kind of sites that you're looking for? Is that
that would be something more with the schools? So I would suggest
I used to do it with the school, so UCLA would send me students. What you're talking about?
Yeah, just reach out to your local schools and say that you're willing to. They will be very happy to hear that, but that's not something that we can facilitate on our website.
But I'm wondering if we can advertise the need for what do you call clinical sites? That maybe people.
I would think that that's more in the jurisdiction of for schools.
Correct.
Yeah, I feel like that responsibility lies mostly with the schools. Any other comments before I call for adjournment? Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us. The time is now 4:18. I would like to really thank my committee members, E.O. Melby, Ms. Clark, Reza, and our moderator. I understand the time commitment for this and working towards our public. We'd like to thank our public for joining us as well. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 20th, 2026. And if you have any additional comments or you would like to send any information to the Impact Committee, please send it to brn.impact@dca.ca.gov. And with that, we will conclude this meeting. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.